Chapter 2282 Ba. Chapter 2282 Ba. In the past, limited by his strength, Ling Han had not done many experiments on the first scroll, and he had gradually forgotten about it afterwards. Now that he had set eyes on it once more, his curiosity could no longer be restrained. He stabbed it with the divine demon's sword. When the tip of the blade touched the scroll, an astonishing light surged out, and his hand became numb. The divine demon's sword almost flew out of his hand. He was stunned. This scroll was really quite incredible. It could even match the sharpness of a celestial tool? He scratched his head in exasperation. Just how exactly was he supposed to unfurl this scroll? He was really too curious. Ling Han thought for a very long time, but he still stowed the two scrolls into his robes in the end. If he didn't touch this thing, it would be no different from any ordinary paper. He could not sense anything special about it at all. Till think about it in the future. First, I have to modify the heaven-deceiving technique. He entered the Black Tower, and comprehended Tao underneath the reincarnation tree. The women had long since started to do this, and the price for it was a great expense in star stones. However, they had many star stones anyways, so there was no need for them to worry about the danger of spending all their star stones for the moment. After spending 1,000,000 years underneath the reincarnation tree, Ling Han had finally successfully completed the modification of the heaven-deceiving technique. Of course, he had borrowed the help of the Origin Magic Cube. Otherwise, he could not reach that height in terms of regulations. He taught the modified heaven-deceiving technique to the women. After they had successfully learned it, to say nothing of deceiving celestial kings, deceiving ascending origin tiers at least should be no issue. The women continued their cultivation, while Ling Han returned to town. Celestial Maiden Yunhe had already waited many days for him, but she was not here at present. Instead, Long Tu was waiting here for him. "Greetings, my lord." When he spotted Ling Han, Long Tu immediately paid his respects. He knew that Ling Han was a monarch tier. There was a need to be respectful towards such an existence. Seeing a member of the foreign realm greet him, his expression respectful, Ling Han felt an indescribable strangeness, yet showed nothing on his expression. He nodded slightly and asked, "Has your master broken through to the fifth leaf?" "Yes." Long Tu immediately stood upright again. This was the fifth leaf. From now, she had advanced into the ranks of monarch tiers, and it was destined that she would eventually become an ancestral king. Following this kind of master was naturally an honor as well. Ling Han smiled. She was just a monarch star. He had killed who knew how many of them, and even a considerable number of monarch stars had died by his hand. He asked, "Where is your master?" "Our celestial maiden has waited many days." "Please follow me, my lord," Long Tu said respectfully. In a small wood outside the town, a lavish carriage was standing by beside the road, and there were over a dozen people chatting and sipping tea around the carriage. Like the moon being surrounded by the stars, celestial Maiden Yunhe accepted the flattery of those around her while she responded with a cordial smile, appearing very calm and relaxed. These people were all members of the angel race, all of them being handsome men and beautiful women. They presented a feast for the eyes. "Celestial Maiden, that person is really putting on airs too much, actually forcing you to wait for so many days," someone exclaimed in displeasure. "That's right. Just who does he think our celestial Maiden Yunhe is? He really should not have done so. Even if celestial Maiden has a kind heart, and is not willing to speak up, we are still determined to seek justice for you." Everyone chattered spiritedly, trying their best to degrade Ling Han. They were naturally jealous because they knew that if it were them that had been late for so many days, there would be absolutely no way that Celestial Maiden Yunhe would be waiting for them. Celestial Maiden Yunhe only smiled faintly, a hint of pride on her face. By now, she had advanced to the fifth severance, and this was precisely a moment when her spirits were the highest. She thought that the distance between herself and Ling Han had already shrunk endlessly, and she might in fact have surpassed him by now. True, Di Fei had indeed died by Ling Han's hand, but there were still differences in strength among 5th Severance monarch tiers. At present, she felt that she was extremely strong, and completely had the strength that Ling Han possessed. To advance from the 4th Severance to 5th Severance was equivalent to breaching the gap between the 4th Severance and dividing Soul tier. This distance was naturally astonishing, and it was no wonder that she had such a high opinion of herself now. At present, she really wanted to have a spar with Ling Han. Right at this moment, Long Tu was seen leading someone here. What, a demon race? When everyone saw this, they all showed expressions of dislike and disdain. What member of the angel race did not hate the demon race? The power of darkness and light that both cultivated were natural enemies, and just barely maintaining peaceful relations was only possible under the pressure of the heavenly venerates. They had never imagined that the person that celestial maiden Yunhe had been patiently waiting for was actually a member of the demon race. Celestial maiden Yunhe nodded. He is indeed a member of the demon race. Just when she was about to introduce Ling Han, she suddenly realized that her knowledge of Ling Han was practically zero. In fact, she didn't even know his name. Forgot to ask your name? She asked Ling Han. Ling Han thought and then said, My name is Ba. When everyone heard this, they were all gritting their teeth. This guy was really shameless. To actually call himself Ba. There were some names that one could not give himself on a whim. For example, you could not simply call yourself Sword King, Sword Emperor, or something like that. Otherwise, there would definitely be swordsmen coming to challenge you. The name Ba was an even greater mockery of the masses. Anyone who heard it would be displeased. Ba, right? Do you dare accept a spar? Someone issued a challenge towards Ling Han. Ling Han broke into a grin. Sure. However, everyone that has fought with me would mysteriously end up calling me father. Everyone was at a loss at first before realization dawned on them. If they ended up shivering from being beaten down on, and kept calling Ba, wouldn't it be calling him father? Why did this guy have such a mean tongue? From the very beginning, he was offending others. Zijian, stop. Celestial Maiden Yunhe hurriedly tried to stop him. This challenger was only a 4th Severance King tier. When against Ling Han, he was practically delivering himself up to be defeated. Furthermore, Ling Han dared to kill even Di Fei, so was there anyone else he did not dare kill? That challenger was naturally not convinced. In front of his goddess, how could he possibly cower? He humphed and said, Celestial Maiden, don't worry. I will observe propriety in my attacks. Shio, he quickly charged out an attack without waiting for any further words from Celestial Maiden Yunhe. Everyone felt their vision blur, and the next thing they saw was that Ling Han had gripped the challenger by his neck. Ling Han slightly released the killing intent in his body, and the challenger instantly shuddered harshly, saying shakily, Ba. In everyone's ears, it did indeed sound like he was calling Ling Han father. This guy was really too mean to actually give himself such a name. Celestial Maiden Yunhe stepped out and said, Brother Ba, I shall battle with you. Ling Han's enthusiasm waned. He had defeated even a 7th Lotus 3 Leaves King tier, so how could he possibly be interested to spar with a 6th Lotus Monarch tier? He merely yawned, tossed the challenger casually to the side, and said, All right, I'll exchange a few moves with you. Everyone was extremely angered. Ling Han was clearly a severing mundane tier as well, yet actually dared to speak so proudly. He was really too arrogant. Celestial Maiden Yunhe set her eyes on Ling Han, and prepared to make a move, but while her eyes were fixed on Ling Han, a profound chill came to be in her heart, and she actually dared not attack. She instinctively felt that she would be harshly struck by Ling Han if she dared to move in the slightest, and would die an early, pitiable death. This was an intuition that she had gained only after advancing into the 5th Severance, and she trusted this kind of feeling very much. According to her elders, this was an early warning about danger, and she could not take it lightly. To drum up courage for herself, she drew out a sword. It was entirely jade blue in color, and looked like crystal. At the same time, there were multiple ancient seals carved on its blade. This is the Jade Moon Lake Life Sword, The precious tool that has been passed through the generations of celestial Maiden Yunhe's clan. No, 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 this must be a subsidiary sword. Otherwise, how could celestial Maiden Yunhe be allowed to take it out? Even if it is a subsidiary sword, it should still be extremely powerful. Why is celestial Maiden Yunhe still not making a move? Everyone was stunned. It was as if celestial Maiden Yunhe was dazed. She merely stood in position, but still made no move. Chapter 2283 Class begins. Chapter 2283 Class begins. Celestial Maiden Yunhe knew her own suffering. She did not dare to make a move at all. It was as if what she was facing was not a person, but rather a ferocious primitive beast. Once she made a move, she would be facing a terrifying counter, and would lose her life in an instant. And with her aura tightly locked down on, she did not dare even open her mouth, fearing that it, too, would result in an attack from Ling Han. Droplets of sweat streamed down her forehead, and her whole body was completely damp. She felt incredibly weary. It was not a physical weariness, but a spiritual exhaustion. She really wanted to lie down and take a good rest, not wanting to move even a single finger. Even if everyone could not see the storm brewing under the surface between Ling Han and celestial Maiden Yunhe, they only had to see the layer of cold sweat on celestial Maiden Yunhe's forehead, and they knew that she was presently in an extremely disadvantageous position. They were all astounded. Ling Han hadn't even made a move, all right? Why did celestial Maiden Yunhe look like she had just gone through a fight, and it had been an extremely difficult, great battle at that? She looked like she was close to death. Ling Han smiled slightly, and withdrew his aura. Instantly, he became harmless again. However, with the appearance of the demon race, he appeared slightly eerie and frightening. At this, no one dared to speak any further. Even an idiot would know that Ling Han was indescribably powerful, and celestial Maiden Yunhe was not even capable of making a move. Celestial Maiden Yunhe breathed a sigh of relief. She finally understood that Ling Han had defeated Di Fei with a single move, not because the latter was too weak, but rather because Ling Han was too strong. This person's strength had even surpassed the range of monarch tears. However, it should be known that monarch stars would only emerge from the dividing soul tear onward, and it was the final stages of the dividing soul tear at that. How could there be monarch stars in the severing mundane tear? A monarch tear was the strongest among them. With both of them being monarch tears, why was there such a huge gap between them? She composed herself and said, "Everyone, please board the carriage. It is time that we should set out towards the 100 Battles Academy." No one spoke, and everyone merely boarded the carriage in silence. They were still in utter astonishment at how powerful Ling Han was. This carriage of celestial Maiden Yunhe was extremely spacious. There was absolutely no problem even if over a dozen people boarded it together. Everyone sat down on the seats, appearing very reserved. From a certain aspect, this was also celestial Maiden Yunhe's private domain. Ling Han boarded the carriage, and with a sweep of his gaze he strode forwards with absolutely no reservations, and planted himself on the soft couch. It was naturally this that was the most comfortable seat here. Immediately, everyone turned to look at him, gritting their teeth and pursing their lips. That was celestial Maiden Yunhe's private couch, and you actually dared to sit on it. Isn't this an offense to the beauty? Ling Han did not take the expressions of the masses to heart at all. He simply switched to a more comfortable position, crossing his legs. In fact, even his shoes were touching the sheets. Even if celestial Maiden Yunhe had already experienced this once, she still wanted to thrash Ling Han. Now this guy was really too despicable. She had made up her mind. Once Ling Han disembarked from the carriage, she would immediately discard this soft couch. However, seeing how Ling Han grabbed a towel from beside the couch to wipe himself, celestial Maiden Yunhe almost passed out in fury. That was her personal towel. Not too long ago, she had just used it, and now Ling Han wiping himself with it was equivalent to indirect intimate contact between the two of them, causing a murderous urge to rise up in her. Everyone remembered the name, Ba. They had understood by now. There was no way that they could possibly match Ling Han. They could only anticipate the big shots in the 100 Battles Academy would make a move after they enrolled, or maybe those elites that had already advanced into the 7th Lotus would do so. On the journey, everyone was especially quiet. The carriage rocked and swayed for half a year until it finally stopped, and Long Tu's voice rang out from outside. "Master, we have reached the 100 Battles Academy." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. They had finally arrived, and there was no further need for them to face Ling Han. They had really been under enormous stress. They hurriedly alighted from the carriage, while Ling Han was the second last to disembark. When he had gotten off the carriage, Celestial Maiden Yunhe's irritated voice rang out. "Long Tu, discard everything that is in my carriage." Right, it was not just Ling Han. She had also developed a grudge against everyone else. Long Tu did not understand, yet could only obey. How could he possibly dare to question her commands? The 100 Battles Academy was built at the foot of a mountain, with structures that stretched outward. There were a considerable number of greatly differing building styles among them. One was the style of the demon race, simple and crude, wild and primitive. Another was the style of the angel race, filled with luxury and unnecessary lavishness. Even a small house would be built with all effort and the best materials. There were also multiple caves, eerie and frightening. Those were allocated for the insect race. There were also stretches of forest, with the main colors being white and gold. This was to accommodate the holy beasts. Ling Han and the others entered into the academy. Celestial Maiden Yunhe made arrangements for them, so someone from the academy came out very soon and conducted a selection process for them. Only those that had reached King tier at least would be qualified to become disciples of the 100 Battles Academy. Ling Han's heart was a little heavy because the king tiers of the foreign realm numbered far more than in the celestial realm. With just the numbers he had seen, there were astonishingly many of them, and in the greater environment of the entire foreign realm, this was definitely just a drop in the ocean. The overall level of this realm was higher than the celestial realms, so it could accommodate more prodigies and elites. Ling Han passed very easily. He was a monarch tier, and he would definitely be treated with great regard even in the forces of an 18th Lotus ancestral king. At present, he was a member of the demon race, so he was naturally assigned to stay in the demon quarters, staying together with his companions, who likewise had red skin, honed heads, and tails. If Ling Han had been given the choice, he would have definitely chosen to stay in the angel quarters. They were at least easy on the eyes. The main theme of the demon quarters was fighting. It was like they were all filled with endless energy. Sometimes there would not have been any conflict at all. They merely wanted to fight because they were in a good or bad mood. Ling Han could not care less, and simply lay down in his rooms to sleep, waiting for classes to start at the academy. He was truly very interested in the cultivation world and history of the foreign realm. Also, why did the foreign realm have to invade the celestial realm? It was clear that the celestial realm had an inferior overall level of cultivation, so what could they do even if they succeeded in their conquest? It was one thing for the others, but why would the heavenly venerable tiers of the foreign realm have to move? They really could not gain any form of benefit. There must be something I don't know, Ling Han thought. This was also the reason why he wanted to come here. Several days later, there was information from the academy. Class would begin tomorrow, and the main lecturer was a 9th Lotus elite. After waiting patiently for a day, Ling Han went with a large number of his companions towards the plaza of the academy. In the 4 directions of north, south, east, and west, each zone was clearly separated. The demon race was on the east side, the angel race on the west side, the holy beasts on the south side, and the insect race on the north side. There was definitely no one who sat randomly. Ling Han's gaze swept over the masses, and he was secretly astonished. The number of king tiers and emperor tiers here was really astonishing, with their majestic life essence soaring sky high. Previously, in the neutral zone, he had killed a great many prodigies through deception. Initially, he had thought that it would be a severe wound to the foreign realm, causing a vacuum to appear in the next few billion years. But from the look of things now, he had really been too optimistic. There were over 10,000 people here, and the strongest among them was 8th Lotus. In other words, they were immortal Palastirs, but there were not many of them. It was said that the Academy would ordinarily nurture their students up to the 7th Lotus, and they would leave upon attaining the 7th Lotus. Only the really outstanding figures would be able to stay behind, and continue to enjoy the resources provided by the Academy. Hence, the 7th Lotuses that appeared here were Emperor tiers, at least, and those 8th Lotuses were definitely Monarch tiers. For the sake of survival! An elite shot forwards, the pattern of 9th Lotus blooming on his forehead. This was an elite of the insect race. He was just a giant ant, completely dark red in color, his joints like metal. For the sake of survival! Everyone roared as well, appearing extremely excited. Chapter 2284 Reality of the Realm War. Chapter 2284 Reality of the Realm War. If these people had shouted, "Long live the foreign realm! The foreign realm is invincible!" and so on, Ling Han wouldn't have been surprised at all. However, to shout for survival. This was extremely baffling for Ling Han. Perhaps there was some inconceivable lie being told in the foreign realm? Instead of the foreign realm invading the celestial realm, perhaps they had been told that it was the celestial realm invading the foreign realm? Ling Han remained calmly seated. Right now, it was best for him to silently listen. Do you know what kind of threat we're currently facing? The 9th Lotus Elite asked in an extremely solemn voice. Yes! Everyone shouted. The 9th Lotus Elite nodded, and continued. The Dark Inverse Realm is currently attacking us. Their realm is higher in level than ours, and they possess innumerable elites. If they successfully breach our defenses, our only fate is to be massacred. Our realm will be engulfed by the Dark Inverse Realm, and our descendants will all be exterminated. Our existence will be comprehensively erased. So what's our final hope? Our final hope is to conquer that super low-level dimension, and to massacre its populace. Our realm can then engulf that super low-level dimension, and ascend to a higher level, allowing us to resist the Dark Inverse Realm. In fact, we might even be able to surpass the Dark Inverse Realm. Everyone replied in unison. This clearly wasn't their first time engaging in such a conversation. Upon hearing this, Ling Han was so astounded that he could barely speak. As it turned out, the foreign realm was also in a similar position to the celestial realm. They were currently being invaded by another higher-level realm. Their defenses might collapse at any time, leading to a massacre of their populace. When their defenses collapsed, could anyone survive the ensuing onslaught? The solution to this dilemma was also extremely simple. They would destroy the celestial realm, and use it to raise the level of their realm. By doing so, they could then resist, or even defeat the Dark Inverse Realm. As it turned out, the foreign realm had always been engaged in a war on two fronts. On the one side, they were at war against an invading realm, and on the other side, they were the assailants trying to invade the celestial realm. No wonder the heavenly venerates were so proactive. At the end of the day, it was all for the sake of survival. Hang on! Ling Han shook his head in his mind. Heavenly venerates were already transcendent above regulations, so just how much would they be affected if they resided in a different heaven and earth? No one knew the answer to this question. Perhaps they wouldn't be affected, or perhaps they would. However, even Ling Han himself could recultivate using the regulations of the foreign realm, so how was it possible that heavenly venerates couldn't? Heavenly venerates were unfathomably powerful, so even if the foreign realm were destroyed, heavenly venerates like Heavenly Venerate Qian could still enter the Dark Inverse Realm and live a leisurely life. After all, just take a look at the composed demeanor of the three heavenly venerates from the celestial realm. They couldn't care less about the perilous situation of the celestial realm. Instead, they embraced this opportunity to attack their rivals. Thus, there was definitely more to this than met the eye. However, it was a shame that this kind of secret naturally wouldn't be revealed to the masses. Only those in the highest positions could know. A sense of fatigue washed over Ling Han. What did it matter even if they could stop the foreign realm? Once the foreign realm fell to the Dark Inverse Realm, the next in line to fall would be the celestial realm. Moreover, If even the foreign realm couldn't resist them, just what chance did the celestial realm have? In addition, the foreign realm always referred to the celestial realm as a super low-level dimension, yet they still couldn't defeat it after such a long time. From this, it was clear that their level wasn't much higher. The same could be said for the dark inverse realm. That being the case, how could they defend against an invasion from a medium-level or high-level realm? Just thinking about this was tiring. Would they have to battle forever, until the end of time? Linghan shuddered, and his feeling of despair rapidly vanished. What replaced it was a boundless fighting spirit. If defeating the foreign realm were the end of his journey, would life not become a huge bore? Even though Linghan had never admitted this before, he knew what he felt in his heart. In reality, he greatly enjoyed his current lifestyle. To continually challenge himself and take risks added excitement and flavor to his life. It was this kind of life that he desired, not an eternal and unchanging life. To battle against heaven, to battle against earth, and to battle against others. What boundless joy! A faint smile spread across his face. He brimmed with fighting spirit, and he could barely contain his urge to immediately charge into a higher level dimension and battle to his heart's content. Moreover, the heaven and earth of the foreign realm is clearly more tolerant toward heavenly venerates. Regardless of whether heavenly venerate Qi Yen steps forward or attacks, the heaven and earth of the foreign realm has never targeted him. That being the case, might there exist beings transcendent above the heavenly venerable tier in higher level dimensions? Linghan mulled over this question in his mind. This wasn't impossible. Moreover, there was now evidence to support this speculation. Very well, the ninth lotus said. However, if we want to invade the celestial realm, we must first become accustomed to battling in their realm. The regulations of the two realms are different, though this won't affect wheat cultivators like us. We won't be targeted by the heaven and earth of the celestial realm. However, it's a different story for those at or above the celestial king tier. Thus, we're unable to unleash our full battle prowess at the celestial realm. We must prepare for such a situation. Otherwise, engagement in this war might lead to your deaths. The audience had likely heard this warning many times before. However, they still nodded with solemn expressions. Once their invasion transformed into a full-scale war, they would charge into the celestial realm even if they hadn't become ancestral kings yet. They would accelerate the death of the celestial realm, thereby allowing the foreign realm to more quickly ascend in level. Today's lesson was nothing more than an opportunity to instill a sense of impending danger in everyone's mind. The dark inverse realm was waging an all-out war against them, and their situation was truly fragile and perilous. Only by conquering and engulfing the celestial realm could they be saved. As such, this was a righteous invasion. Linghan was from the celestial realm, so he naturally wouldn't feel any sympathy for the foreign realm. Now, however, he at least knew why they insisted on invading the celestial realm. He also understood why there was so much support behind this invasion, and why the foreign realm could tolerate sacrificing generation after generation of prodigies. After a day of lessons, Linghan couldn't help but feel tired and muddle-headed. Afterward, he went to the library to read the relevant information. He had initially thought that the battle between the foreign realm and the celestial realm had been a huge secret, just like how few people in the celestial realm had known about the invasion launched by the foreign realm. However, he discovered that it was quite the contrary. This was no secret in the foreign realm, and it was instead used as a motivation for cultivators to grow stronger. Before long, Linghan had already read a large number of books. The realm wars were extremely cruel, and victory for one party would mean defeat and extermination for another. Their entire realm would be dissolved, and their entire population would be erased. This was because living beings were the foundation of a realm. If they weren't culled to a certain degree, the heaven and earth that they existed in couldn't be engulfed. As such, the primary goal of the foreign realm after invading the celestial realm would be to massacre its residents. Afterward, the heaven and earth of the celestial realm would become extremely frail, allowing them to engulf it. When the two realms fused into one, the resulting realm would naturally be of a higher level. This also meant that a greater number of powerful beings could be born. Not only was the foreign realm invading the celestial realm, but the dark inverse realm was also invading the foreign realm. In reality, these realm wars had always been raging. In the past, heavenly venerates from the foreign realm had traveled to the dark inverse realm, and even to realms further beyond. They had discovered more secrets, and according to them, the entirety of the dimension was referred to as the Genesis world. There were countless realms, and they were divided into 4 levels: top level, high level, medium level, and low level. Both the foreign realm and the celestial realm were low-level dimensions. However, there were still countless other low-level dimensions, so it was possible to rank them in terms of strength. The celestial realm was most likely the weakest of the low-level dimensions. This was because they hadn't discovered any other neighboring realm apart from the foreign realm. Indeed, all ordinary realms would have 2 neighboring realms, one slightly stronger and one slightly weaker. If they didn't want to be engulfed by the stronger realm, they would only have one option to engulf the weaker realm. Afterward, Ling Han discovered even more information. The celestial realm had only appeared 130 epochs ago, while the foreign realm had appeared 150 epochs ago. This was quite some difference. Chapter 2285 Invitation from Celestial Maiden Yunhe. Chapter 2285 Invitation from Celestial Maiden Yunhe. Even though 130 epochs seemed like a long time, in the Genesis world, 130 epochs was truly an insignificant amount of time. According to rumors, the top-level dimensions had all existed for at least hundreds of millions of epochs. In comparison, the celestial realm couldn't even be viewed as a grandson. After birth, a realm needed an exorbitant amount of time to grow to a state of perfection. Thus, in reality, the celestial realm had only experienced a rich cultivation culture for around 20 to 30 epochs. Moreover, it was only at this time that it collided with another realm, intertwining together and forming a passageway. A weaker realm hadn't appeared behind the celestial realm, and this meant that the realm either hadn't been born yet, or it was still in the process of growing. However, there would eventually come a day when it connected with the celestial realm. This was the unchanging cycle in the Genesis world. Old realms were continuously engulfed, while new realms were continuously born. On one side of the foreign realm, there was a connection point to the celestial realm, a platform from which they could launch their invasion. On the other side, there was a connection point to the dark inverse realm, a passageway from which the dark inverse realm could launch their invasion. On that side, the angel race and the holy beasts were responsible for the defenses. The foreign realm was engaged in war on 2 fronts. Ling Han was secretly astonished. Fortunately, light was opposed to darkness. Fortunately, the dark inverse realm was also invading the foreign realm. Otherwise, if the heavenly venerates from the foreign realm had attacked, the celestial realm would have most likely ceased to exist several epochs ago. The entire Genesis world is swept up in realm wars, and no one can escape from this reality, Ling Han said with a sigh. This was a cruel thought, yet it filled him with fighting spirit. At the same time, he was also weighed down with pressure. If an elite from a top-level or high-level dimension entered at this moment, could they perhaps exterminate all of their opponents in these low-level dimensions with their own strength? Strength. Only by becoming stronger could one stand up straight. Ling Han temporarily pushed his thoughts and curiosity of the realm wars aside. In any case, he would only become cannon fodder with his current strength. As such, his only option was to become stronger. He wished that the foreign realm could resist for a while longer, and he also wished that the celestial realm could resist for a while longer. He needed time to develop formidable power. The cultivation environment of the foreign realm was clearly superior to the celestial realms, since everyone was aware that they would be massacred by the dark inverse realm if they didn't first conquer and engulf the celestial realm. Thus, everyone prioritized cultivation. The heaven and earth of the foreign realm had also welcomed a prosperous age, with their celestial medicines far more abundant than in the celestial realm. The number of natural treasures was also greater, and this allowed the foreign realm to nurture countless astonishingly powerful prodigies and Elites. In order to attack the celestial realm and defend against the dark inverse realm, the foreign realm had mobilized everyone that it could. For example, the 100 Battles Academy was one of the countless academies in the foreign realm. It was run by an ancestral king, and it was fully focused on nurturing the younger generation, thereby elevating the cultivation level of the entire foreign realm. Living beings were dependent on heaven and earth, and the power of living beings could also be fed back to heaven and earth. If everyone were as powerful as a dragon, the heaven and earth that they resided in would also become peerless in terms of power. It would suppress any assailants to an even greater degree. Ling Han involuntarily thought of the sealed emotion Heavenly Venerable and the others. They had blocked all information about the invasion by the foreign realm, and they had created a guise of peace. In reality, they were dampening the motivation of people, and they were weakening the power of heaven and earth. As such, it was only natural that the suppression provided by heaven and earth against the assailants was weak. Thinking further about their inaction, and Ling Han could categorically conclude that the three of them had zero intention of stopping the invasion by the foreign realm. Instead, they were weighing the celestial realm down, and they were eager to witness its destruction. So, why didn't they proactively turn traitors? This was because heavenly venerates weren't tolerated by the celestial realm's heaven and earth. They would be targeted if they showed themselves, and they would more so suffer a backlash from heaven and earth if they dared to interfere. Killing 1 or 2 people naturally wouldn't be a problem. However, if they killed too many people, the karmic backlash would certainly be too great even for heavenly venerates to handle. Ling Han came to a sudden realization. He finally understood why the ancient realm had been separated in two, and why the people from the ancient realm weren't allowed to enter the celestial realm. This was because if the ancient realm became whole, more people would enter the celestial realm. And more people would advance to the severing mundane tier, dividing soul tier, and even higher cultivation levels. At that time, heaven and earth would become more powerful, which was something not desired by the three heavenly venerates. Of course, there might have been even more reasons that Ling Han couldn't think of. Forget about this. I should cultivate and try to advance to the dividing soul tier as soon as possible. I'm clearly at the second secret already, yet I have to suffer as a fifth severance cultivator. This is a terrible feeling, Ling Han muttered. He stood up and left the library, heading off to cultivate. Even though the 100 Battles Academy was only founded by a 10th Lotus ancestral king, the facilities in the academy were all top-notch. For example, the time cultivation chambers could accelerate time up to 1,000 times. However, it wasn't easy to enter such cultivation chambers. One needed to possess the most brilliant cultivation talent. Even though Ling Han was a monarch tier, he still didn't have the right to enter such a cultivation chamber. If he wanted to, he would need to display even more talent. Before he even started to cultivate, the Empress, Yunhe, and bewitching Maiden had already mastered the heaven-deceiving technique. Right now, they could genuinely wander around the foreign realm. Moreover, Yunhe's and the Empress cultivation had already returned to the fifth severance. Meanwhile, bewitching Maiden also successfully advanced from the Emperor tier to the Monarch tier. She also advanced to the fifth severance. This was, of course, thanks to the mystical power of the 100 Fruits tree. She was extremely fortunate, and she managed to advance after consuming just 3 fruits. Ling Han released the 3 of them from the Black Tower, and disguised them as residents of the foreign realm. After he used the heaven-deceiving technique to touch up their disguises, perhaps even ancestral kings wouldn't be able to see through them if they didn't look carefully. Without any hesitation, the 3 women all chose to disguise themselves as the angel race. This was for no reason bar the fact that they were beautiful. Regarding this choice, to say nothing of the Empress and bewitching Maiden, even Yunhe felt the same. Ling Han felt extremely vexed about this. The 3 women would all reside in the angel quarters, and not a single one would stay with him. Don't be sad, Ling Han. Yunhe will frequently come to visit you, Yunhe said as she patted Ling Han's shoulder with a comforting expression. Ling Han could only shake his head as he led the 3 of them to the academy. The 100 Battles Academy was always open to recruiting new prodigies. Since the three women were all monarchs, they were naturally accepted without a hitch. In fact, their arrival caused some commotion in the angel quarters, since there weren't many monarchs even in the foreign realm, much less three stunningly beautiful monarchs. Ling Han spent almost half a year in the time cultivation chamber. However, he was eventually called out by someone. It was Yunhe. "Ba, are you interested in joining my team?" the woman asked. Before, she had considered never making contact with Ling Han ever again lest she recalled the scenes of him humiliating her. However, she now had a necessary reason to invite him. "To do what?" Ling Han asked in a calm voice. "Obtained an ancient map from my clan, and I discovered an incredible region. Perhaps this region will bring us great fortunes." Celestial Maiden Yunhe replied. Ling Han pondered for a moment. If he relied on himself to cultivate, he most likely would need tens of thousands of years to return to the second secret. This was already taking into account the resources provided by the Academy. However, if he obtained some natural treasures, this time would definitely be slashed by a great amount. He naturally wanted to return to the second secret as soon as possible. "When are you heading off?" he asked. "If Brother Ba accepts my invitation, I'll go and contact a few more people. We can set off in around 10 days, Celestial Maiden Yunhe replied. Ling Han nodded in acknowledgement before returning to the time cultivation chamber to cultivate. Even if there were only 10 days left, he still wouldn't want to waste them. Celestial Maiden Yunhe couldn't help but feel gloomy. This man was actually so indifferent to her? There was nothing she could do about this. After all, he was a stinky bastard from the demon race who didn't know how to appreciate her beauty. This was how she consoled herself. Chapter 2286 Taken Fancy to. Chapter 2286 Taken Fancy to. 10 days passed, and Celestial Maiden Yunhe arrived as promised. Ling Han left the academy with her, and after walking around in a huge circle, they finally entered a small forest where there were already a dozen or so people waiting. They were all beautiful members of the angel race. Upon seeing them arrive, 3 beautiful women from the angel race blinked at him in unison. However, this wasn't seen by the others. They were none other than the Empress, Yunhe, and bewitching Maiden Ro. "Huh! Why did the 3 of them also come?" They were all monarchs, so it wasn't strange that they had been invited by Celestial Maiden Yunhe. However, it was strange that none of them had come to tell him. Perhaps they had wanted to give him a surprise. In any case, upon seeing that Celestial Maiden Yunhe had actually invited a demon, the remaining people all wore expressions of displeasure. What was the meaning of this? "Celestial Maiden Yunhe, why did you invite a demon to our party?" a man asked. He had golden yellow hair, and his skin was as smooth and delicate as could be. In fact, it was perhaps more well kept than that of most women. Celestial Maiden Yunhe had already predicted their displeasure, and she said with a faint smile, "Brother Ba possesses extraordinary strength, so he'll definitely be a huge help for this adventure." "Haha, he's nothing but an ugly demon," the man said in disdain. "So what if he's a monarch? We have a total of 7 monarchs here." Upon hearing this, Ling Han couldn't help but sigh with emotion in his mind. The 100 Battles Academy was only one of almost 1,000 academies in the foreign realm, yet there were already 7 monarchs standing before him. The celestial realm simply couldn't rival this. It was no wonder that it was still the foreign realm that was attacking and comprehensively suppressing the celestial realm even after so many years. "Han Feng, watch your words," Celestial Maiden Yunhe immediately said in warning. She had witnessed Ling Han's cold-bloodedness before, and she was also well aware of his heaven-defying power. She had been completely powerless before him. "Celestial Maiden Yunhe, have you been deceived by this brat's bombastic words?" the man sneered. Celestial Maiden Yunhe was a rising star in the angel quarters of the 100 Battles Academy. Before the arrival of Yunhe and the others, she had been a unique existence with no rival. Countless men had been enchanted by her. However, Celestial Maiden Yunhe had never given them the time of the day, much less become someone's partner. Now, however, she was actually being so friendly with the demon? That naturally caused them to feel dissatisfied. This man was simply the first to step forward. Celestial Maiden Yunhe furrowed her delicate brows. In reality, she was also extremely displeased with Ling Han. He had messed with her things without permission, and he also treated her with such apathy. If it weren't for his extraordinary power, and if it weren't for the fact that he could greatly increase their safety on this adventure, she definitely wouldn't have invited him. If you don't want to fight alongside Brother Ba, you're free to leave right away. I won't stop you. Celestial Maiden Yunhe said in a calm voice. Everyone exchanged glances, and their expressions of displeasure became even greater. They felt like Celestial Maiden Yunhe was favoring Ling Han far too much. No matter how they looked, they couldn't see any redeeming qualities in the demon. Brother Ba, is it? I want to ask for some advice, the man said. He glanced at Ling Han, and his lips curled up in a light smile. Ling Han looked at Celestial Maiden Yunhe and asked, It's fine if I kill a fool like him, right? Celestial Maiden Yunhe hurriedly shook her head, saying, Han Feng is the young master of the Golden Sun clan, so please go easy on him, Brother Ba. Oh, okay then, Ling Han said with a smile. Upon hearing this, the angels became even more displeased. They had yet to fight, but the two of them had already concluded the victory of the demon in advance. How preposterous was this? After all, Han Feng was also a 5 Leaves monarch tier. Even if there were a power gap between monarch tiers, it wouldn't be so great, would it? Very well. Very well, the man said with a dark expression. He directly retrieved a glowing treasured sword which almost looked as if it were transparent. With a shake of his hands, 10 symbols instantly materialized on the sword. 10-symbol treasured tool, everyone exclaimed. In the foreign realm, the power of treasured tools was completely decided by the number of symbols that decorated them. However, at the 6th lotus, the upper limit was only 10 symbols. Even so, it was still extremely difficult to achieve. The materials needed and the skill requirement of the weaponsmith were far too great. Even though they were all Emperor tiers or Monarch tiers, it was still extremely difficult for them to obtain 10-symbol treasured tools. Generally speaking, they would only possess 8-symbol treasured tools. Even 9-symbol treasured tools were extremely rare. Han Feng had retrieved a 10-symbol treasure tool right away, and this was a clear sign that he was indeed burning with fury. He wanted to defeat Ling Han in a single strike. Come! With the treasured tool in hand, Han Feng instantly became filled with confidence. With his might as a monarch tier and the power of this 10-symbol treasured tool, it was only natural that he was now invincible. Since you're asking for a beating, I'll satisfy your itch, Ling Han said in a calm voice. With a casual wave of his hand, he pressed down at the man. Audacious, the man said with a humph. He raised his sword and slashed down at Ling Han. Wang! There was a brilliant flash of light. Ling Han didn't pay any heed to this, and his hand continued to press down. Pa! The sword light instantly crumbled, and Ling Han's hand was like a mountain as it pressed Han Feng to the ground. Han Feng lay sprawled, his face buried in the ground. Everyone was stunned. Han Feng had been defeated in a single exchange? One had to realize that he had retrieved a 10-symbol treasure tool, which could greatly increase his battle prowess. Yet he still couldn't block a single strike from Ling Han? Celestial Maiden Yunhe seized this opportunity to ask. I take it that no one doubts Brother Ba's strength anymore? Even though she had already been aware of Ling Han's strength, this scene still caused her heart to waver. Everyone was speechless. If Ling Han were from the angel race, they would definitely walk up to him with delight. He would be like a shining star. Now, however, they only felt increasingly jealous of Ling Han. He was only a mere demon, so how could he be so freakish? Welcome to the team, Brother Ba, a man said with a smile. However, his smile was extremely forced. They exchanged glances, and they already reached a tacit understanding. Afterward, they would isolate Ling Han and give him the silent treatment. Fortunately, even though celestial maiden Yunhe had seemingly fallen to him, there were still 3 stunningly beautiful women on the team. None of them was inferior to celestial maiden Yunhe. Let's head off, celestial maiden Yunhe said with a wave of her hand. After setting off, she introduced the other team members to Ling Han. Ling Han didn't pay any heed to the others, but he couldn't help but laugh out loud when he heard the names of Hu Niu and the others. One was called Niu, one was called Xing, and one was called Ro. They were truly lazy, and they simply used a character from their real name. Upon seeing Ling Han's smile, celestial maiden Yunhe immediately said in warning, "Brother Ba, it's best that you don't try to chase them." "Why?" Ling Han asked with a smile. Did he need to chase them? They were already his wives. Someone has already taken a fancy to them. Celestial maiden Yunhe replied. So I'm not allowed to chase them then? Ling Han mused with a smile. Celestial maiden Yunhe was instantly pissed off upon hearing this. She was as beautiful as a celestial maiden, yet he was completely apathetic as if he were blind. Despite that, he was attracted to the 3 of them at first glance. How was she any inferior to them? Just what kind of taste did this rascal demon have? She humphed and said, I might as well tell you then. Do you know who Yuan is? No, Ling Han replied with an honest shake of his head. He had been immersed in cultivation recently, so how could he have had time to worry about other matters? Celestial maiden Yunhe was rendered speechless. You don't even know Yuan? Can we still continue this conversation? He's a monarch star, she said in a solemn voice. Chapter 2287 Make a Bet. Chapter 2287 Make a Bet. Oh? Ling Han asked in a casual tone. Celestial maiden Yunhe almost exploded with rage. Did this person not understand the concept of monarch star? She humphed and continued. Yuan is already at the 3rd leaf of the 8th lotus. No matter how freakish you are, you still can't block even a single finger of his. He's the ace and the number 1 elite of the 100 Battles Academy. In the next battle of 1,000 realms, our placing will be determined by how well he can perform. Ling Han's interest was piqued upon hearing this, and he asked, What battle of 1,000 territories? Celestial maiden Yunhe truly wanted to slap him across the face. He didn't even know about the battle of 1,000 territories? How in the world was he a student of the 100 Battles Academy? However, upon remembering that Ling Han was always cultivating in seclusion, she realized that he was perhaps truly ignorant of these matters. Our dimension has a total of 999 territories, each of which has an academy similar to ours. In order to motivate everyone to cultivate, a competition between the academies is held every 1,000,000 years. She explained. Oh, then how high can our academy place? Ling Han asked. 72nd. Celestial maiden Yunhe replied with pride. Is 72nd very high? Ling Han didn't speak. However, his expression was already speaking louder than words. Don't think that 72nd isn't high. You have to realize that there are almost 1,000 academies. Celestial maiden Yunhe immediately said. She wore an expression of reverence, and she continued. If it weren't for Brother Yuan's immense power, we couldn't have even made the top 500. Ling Han understood that this was the power of a monarch star. One monarch star could rival at least 10 monarch tiers. Scouring throughout the entire celestial realm, they could only scrape together 10 or so monarch stars. In the foreign realm, however, even if Yuan were only on the bottom of the pile of monarch stars, it would still signify a total of at least 72 monarch stars. The gulf between the 2 realms was like the distance between heaven and earth. Whom has Yuan taken a fancy to? Ling Han asked. This person actually dared to covet his women. Xing, Celestial maiden Yunhe replied. Oh, such good taste, huh? Even though the 3 women had all donned disguises, the Empress' powerful aura was simply impossible to alter. She was still noble and aloof. To supreme prodigies like Ling Han and Yuan, she was as attractive as could be. Ling Han nodded and said, I'll remember this. Next time I encounter him, I'll definitely pummel him until he abandons his preposterous thoughts. Celestial Maiden Yunhe was rendered speechless. She had told Ling Han about this in the hopes that he would understand that Hu Neo and the others were off limits. To her disbelief, however, Ling Han reacted in a manner completely opposite to her expectations. He was now in competition with you. Yuan. What about the other two? Ling Han asked. Celestial Maiden Yunhe was flabbergasted. Just how great is your appetite? You've yet to win over even one of them, yet you're already thinking about the others? Wu Ye and Sun Feng. Celestial Maiden Yunhe replied. Wu Ye is a monarch tier at the 7th leaf of the 11th lotus. Even though he won't necessarily reach the pinnacle 11th leaf, he's already an incredible talent. She paused for a moment before continuing. Sun Feng is a monarch tier at the 8th leaf of the 8th lotus, and he's even more powerful. In fact, these three are the three most powerful cultivators in the angel quarters. Brother Yu Yuan is more so the most powerful cultivator in our entire academy. She wore an expression of reverence. That was a monarch star. Such prodigies were extremely rare, and there were only around 100 or so monarch stars even throughout the entire foreign realm. Now, do you still think you have a chance with those three women? Celestial Maiden Yunhe asked. Ling Han didn't reply, and he simply looked at Celestial Maiden Yunhe with a strange gaze. He chuckled and said, Time and time again, you're persuading me not to chase after the three of them. Are you perhaps interested in me? Celestial Maiden Yunhe was astounded. Why didn't this demon look in the mirror? With such a terrifying appearance, how could she take a fancy to him? Was she blind? Piss off! She spat. Her eyes were about to shoot flames. She had never come across anyone as narcissistic as Ling Han before. Ling Han roared with laughter and he said, Would you believe me if I said that I could win over all three of them? You! Celestial Maiden Yunhe didn't know whether to laugh or to feel angry. Which woman from the angel race would become attracted to a demon? Do you want to make a bet? Ling Han said, purposefully toying with her. Sure! Celestial Maiden Yunhe immediately replied. If you lose, you owe me 1 fruit from the 100 fruits tree. No, since there are 3 of them, you owe me 3 fruits if you failed to attract any of them. She was at the 5th severance, yet her brother still hadn't reached this level yet. Even though they had a celestial fruit, it was only a single one. The more they had, the more insurance there would be. Moreover, even if her brother succeeded with a single fruit, they could still sell the others for an astronomical price. It would be silly of her not to raise the stakes. This was akin to someone gifting her money, so why wouldn't she take the offer? Ling Han smiled and said, Fine. If I fail to win over any of them, I owe you 3 celestial fruits. But what if I succeed? You tell me. Celestial Maiden Yunhe said. She wouldn't mind even if Ling Han named an exorbitant price. After all, she was confident that Ling Han definitely wouldn't succeed. In any case, how could they be attracted to a member of the demon race? Especially when there were better choices in her own tribe. Ling Han pondered for a moment before saying, I want 7th lotus great herbs. For each one I win over, you owe me 1 great herb. Deal. Celestial Maiden Yunhe immediately said. Both of them were betting celestial medicines, so this was a fair exchange. Moreover, it was impossible for Ling Han to win. Deal, Ling Han said with a smile. They traveled for 3 days before finally stopping to rest. Sure enough, the others isolated Ling Han. They sat in a circle around the campfire, yet when they saw Ling Han walking over, not a single one of them shuffled aside to let him sit. Instead, they continued to eat and drink as if he didn't exist. So what if you're powerful? Can you attack us now? Even Celestial Maiden Yunhe remained unmoving with a smile on her face. She showed no signs of wanting to help Ling Han. After all, who told him to be so arrogant? Ling Han smiled faintly before walking up to the Empress, and asking, Can I sit here? Everyone was stunned upon hearing this. Just how shameless can you be? Those are 3 stunning beauties, so even looking at them is soiling them, yet you actually dare to request a seat between them? Why don't you go die? However, In a sight that shocked them even further, the two women actually shuffled aside to create a spot for Ling Han. Fuck. They were all dazed as they stared at Ling Han taking a seat. They felt like they were in a dream. Celestial Maiden Yunhe had been drinking tea, and upon seeing this, she couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of the beverage. She then broke into a fit of coughing. Ling Han had claimed that he could win over all three women. Even though this couldn't be counted as a success, he was still at least already halfway to success. Otherwise, who would let a stinking man sit between them, much less a stinky insect from the demon race? Everyone was overcome with agonizing grief. Just how breathtakingly beautiful were Ro and Xing. Yet, for some inexplicable reason, they submitted to the lustful request of this demon? They truly wanted to smack themselves to death with a piece of tofu. Fortunately, Neo was pouting in clear displeasure. It was very likely that she had developed a strong resentment toward Ba. Wah, Neo is unhappy now, Hu Neo said in bitterness. Sit next to Neo! Sit next to Neo! She shouted as she patted the space next to her. Holy fuck! Everyone choked and spluttered upon hearing this. Just then, they had still thought that Hu Neo would definitely develop resentment toward Ling Han. As it turned out, however, she was actually jealous that Ling Han hadn't chosen to sit beside her. Ling Han laughed and said, Come, sit on my lap. Hu Neo's displeasure instantly transformed into delight. She then stood up before jumping into Ling Han's embrace, finding a comfortable position to sit in. She wore an expression of happiness and comfort. Everyone else. Chapter 2288 Swindling Others. Chapter 2288 Swindling Others. Who would have imagined that three breathtaking monarch-tier beauties would actually be won over by an ugly and pig-like demon? This was simply illogical. Ling Han turned around to raise his eyebrows at Celestial Maiden Yunhe as if he were telling her to uphold her side of the wager. She now owed him 3 celestial medicines. The others didn't know about their bet, so they instantly became so infuriated that they wanted to bash him to death. He had already won over 3 supreme beauties, yet he still wanted to flirt with Celestial Maiden Yunhe? Meanwhile, as a woman, Celestial Maiden Yunhe refused to believe that female monarch-tiers would fall in love at first sight. This was especially so since the protagonist was of the demon race. Not only that, but all 3 of them had fallen for him in unison. She came to a realization, and she asked, You were already acquainted, am I right? Ling Han roared with laughter. He clapped his hands and said, Yes, indeed. How smart of you! Even though she was being praised by Ling Han, Celestial Maiden Yunhe didn't feel a shred of happiness at all. This was because she had still lost 3 celestial medicines to Ling Han. No, she had been swindled out of 3 celestial medicines. Ling Han had purposefully led her into a trap. She was extremely angry, yet she couldn't help but admire Ling Han's ability. As a demon, he had actually won the hearts of 3 stunningly beautiful angels. He was truly a god of relationships. Everyone was still eating, yet it was as if the food was all tasteless. The 4 stunning beauties had all been won over by Ling Han, and just thinking about this pained their souls. However, prodigies were prodigies, after all. After finishing their meal, they composed themselves and set off again. Nothing was as important as nurturing their own strength. Moreover, Hu Neo and the others had already caught the eyes of Yu Yuan and the others. As such, when they returned to the academy, Yu Yuan and the others definitely wouldn't stand idly by as Ling Han embraced the women left and right. They continued to advance. At times, they would enter regions that were fluctuating with the regulation of light, and they would enter regions that were fluctuating with the regulation of darkness at other times. During the latter times, they would try to avoid the areas of concentrated regulations as much as possible, seeking areas that were more neutral. Fortunately, Ling Han's cultivation of the regulation of darkness wasn't powerful to begin with, so if he actively dispersed it, he wouldn't be affected by either the regulations of light or the regulation of darkness. Hu Neo and the others had even lower mastery of the regulations, so they were naturally affected even less. Even though the two can't be cultivated in unison, one can take the time to analyze both and use them as a reference, Ling Han thought to himself. Heaven and earth were paramount, and their power was profound. Meanwhile, regulations were the materialization of heaven and earth's power. It was tangible, and it was comprehensible. It was no longer mysterious and elusive. By comprehending both the regulation of light and the regulation of darkness, perhaps he could discover the secret to the foreign realm's power. Add to this the fact that he had once been the ruler of a realm, and this would benefit him even more. He could transcend the regulations and directly reach the fundamentals. Why was the core of heaven and earth so important? This was because it could allow one to witness matters transcendent above the regulations. Thereupon, one could obtain the knowledge to transcend the regulations. 3 months later, they arrived at the foot of a tall mountain. According to the information from my clan, this is most likely the tomb of an ancient elite. Celestial Maiden Yunhe said. She was finally willing to reveal some secrets. Before this, her lips had remained sealed. This is an examination given to me by my clan, and they want to see whether I can successfully unearth this ancient tomb or not. She looked at the others and continued, Please help me with your full strength. After opening the ancient tomb, everyone can take a treasure of their choice. If there are cultivation techniques, everyone can also make a copy for themselves. It's our honor to help you, Celestial Maiden. That's right. No need to mention treasures and whatnot. As long as there are cultivation techniques. Everyone was extremely polite. This was mainly because they already had no chance with Yunhe and the others. Meanwhile, Celestial Maiden Yunhe still hadn't fallen yet, so they naturally returned their gaze to her. Then I'll take this opportunity to thank everyone first. Celestial Maiden Yunhe said as she curtsied to them. She then led them onto the mountain. She would frequently stop after walking for a while, and she would close her eyes to mull over something. Only after a moment would she start walking again. There was definitely an extremely complex map in her mind. Otherwise, there would have been no need to pause so often. Ling Han carefully observed his surroundings, and he discovered that there was indeed something peculiar about this place. The rocks were like pillars, with each of them upright and tall. He hadn't felt anything at first, but the further they ventured, the thicker the fog became. This seriously affected their vision. This was a formation. Roar! There was the howl of a beast, and a snow-white tiger suddenly lunged out from behind a stone pillar. It had a pair of wings, and it was clearly a holy beast. There was a snow-white lotus on its forehead, one with 7 petals and 2 leaves. Everyone's expression changed drastically. Even though there were many monarch tiers among them, those at the 5th severance could only rival those at the Yang Soul. After all, there was still a major tier between them. Now, however, this holy beast was at the Yin Soul, meaning that it could rival 10 5th severance monarch tiers. Moreover, this was under the condition that this holy beast wasn't a king tier or an emperor tier. Otherwise, it could easily obliterate them. Enter the formation. Celestial Maiden Yunhe cried. Before coming here, they had already made the necessary preparations. As such, they naturally wouldn't be sent into disarray by the appearance of a second-leaf 7-petal holy beast. They immediately entered a formation, with 7 people in each subgroup. They could combine their power together, and they could unleash a battle prowess greater than if they simply fought together with no formation. Celestial Maiden Yunhe took the lead as she immediately charged at the tiger. However, Ling Han squinted his eyes as he observed this. The appearance of this tiger was far too strange. He had a nagging feeling that this wasn't a real tiger, but instead an illusion created by a formation. Boom! Celestial Maiden Yunhe's attack landed, and the tiger instantly shuddered before vanishing without a trace. Huh! Where has that holy beast gone? Perhaps it's mastered some spatial secret technique, allowing it to escape? That's right. How can a 2-leaved 7th lotus holy beast be killed so easily? They didn't dare to drop their guard, and they all remained extremely vigilant and careful lest the holy beast suddenly appeared and attacked them again. Ling Han smiled and said, No need to be so worried. This is most likely an illusion formation, so that holy beast can't possibly appear again. How conceited! The others said with a shake of their heads. Which part of that holy beast looked fake? Right at this moment, there was a flash of white as another holy beast appeared. It was a snow-white wolf that had a pair of wings on its back. Only its eyes were golden, and its appearance was extremely mighty and domineering. There were 7 petals and 3 leaves on its forehead. Not good, everyone exclaimed. Their expressions changed again. They could rival 2-leaf 7th Lotus elites, yet those at the 3rd leaf were far too powerful. If they battled head-on, their only fate would be death. As such, only fools would charge into battle. Retreat first. Celestial Maiden Yunhe hurriedly shouted. Everyone retreated, and only Ling Han remained unmoving. The white wolf roared as it lunged at Ling Han. Ling Han stood with his hands clasped behind his back, completely ignoring the holy beast. Whoosh! The white wolf landed upon him, yet it directly passed through his body. It was as if Ling Han were transparent. It's genuinely an illusion, everyone exclaimed in astonishment. They then looked at Ling Han in respect and admiration. They truly hadn't discovered anything wrong with the white wolf. The gulf between their observation skills was extremely clear. Ling Han simply wore a faint smile. It was more so a sixth sense that had told him that the holy beast was fake. Moreover, he hadn't possessed this kind of sixth sense before. It had only been nurtured after he had become the ruler of a realm. This was because the ruler of a realm could transcend the regulations and directly observe the fundamentals. However, he naturally wouldn't explain this. He looked at Celestial Maiden Yunhe and said, "Come, continue to lead the way." Being able to see through these illusions was one matter, and wanting him to shatter this illusion formation was another matter altogether. Celestial Maiden Yunhe nodded in reply. At the same time, she breathed a sigh of relief in her mind. Fortunately, she had invited Ling Han to come along, or they would have been greatly troubled by these illusions of holy beasts, and they might have even chosen to give up and leave. She analyzed the map in her mind before setting off again. Chapter 2289 Another Group of People. Chapter 2289 Another Group of People. This time, regardless of what holy beasts appeared, and regardless of how powerful they were, everyone ignored them as they bravely marched forward. This greatly increased their speed, and they walked out of the illusion formation in just an hour. A deep cave appeared before them. However, they immediately frowned when they arrived. This was because there was already another group of people standing before the cave. Ha! Upon noticing Ling Han and the others, the group of people also turned around to look at them. There were 7 people in total, with 7 men and 2 women. Moreover, they were all from the demon race. "Why have you people come here?" someone from the group asked. "I should be the one asking this question," Celestial Maiden Yunhe said in a solemn voice. A demon stepped forward and said, "Oh, you're Celestial Maiden Yunhe from the Jiloa clan, right?" Judging by the others' reactions, this demon was most likely their leader. Celestial Maiden Yunhe observed them for a while before saying, "Jianhu from the Baoyu clan?" "That's me," the demon said with a nod. He exuded a domineering aura as he stood with his hands clasped behind his back. Celestial Maiden Yunhe's expression tensed up, and she whispered to her companions, "The Baoyu clan is a powerful 9th Lotus clan, and Baoyu Jianhu is more so a prodigy of the younger generation. Right now, he's studying at the 9 Soaring Academy." 9 Soaring Academy? Expressions of fury spread across everyone's face. Around 1 million years ago, Yuan had been defeated by a freak from the 9 Soaring Academy. It was because of this that they could only place 72nd. Otherwise, the 100 Battles Academy could have ranked even higher. Thus, they naturally had no good feelings for the 9 Soaring Academy. And in any case, Celestial Maiden Yunhe, how did those people also get here? Someone asked. This was a key question. Even with a map, they had still gone through so many struggles to get here. If it were said that Baoyu Jianhu and the others had made it here by luck, who would believe it? Celestial Maiden Yunhe furrowed her delicate brows. After a moment she said, "The Jiloa clan obtained the map from an auction. However, they sold several copies of the map, and the Baoyu clan also obtained one." Everyone frowned upon hearing this. The ancient tomb was indeed dangerous, but the greatest dangers in life often came from other living things. Dude over there, are you trying to lose the face of our demon race? You're actually teaming up with a bunch of angels? Someone said to Ling Han. Their voice was filled with disdain. Indeed, angels were opposed to demons, and it would already be a good outcome if they didn't fight. Mingling together was nothing short of a miracle. Ling Han grinned and said, "And what are you going to do?" A demon leaped forward. His face was twisted with malice and rage, and he shouted, "Fuck, I'm going to kill you, you degenerate!" Meanwhile, the angels beside celestial maiden Yunhe continued to chatter and laugh. They had their arms crossed before their chests, and it was as if this had completely nothing to do with them. First of all, this was an internal conflict between demons, so it indeed had nothing to do with them. Second of all, Ling Han was far too powerful, so they didn't need to help him at all. Even celestial maiden Yunhe showed no signs of interfering. She simply turned to Bao Jianhu and said, "Control your own people. Otherwise, don't run to me and regret afterward." Bao Jianhu sneered in reply. He simply disregarded this as celestial maiden Yunhe making an empty show of strength. Seeing no opposition from Bao Jianhu, the demon immediately lunged at Ling Han. With a pressing motion, his hands transformed into a mountain of arrows. Whoosh! Tens of thousands of arrows whistled forward, yearning to pierce Ling Han and kill him. Pa! Ling Han casually swung his palm, upon which the demon was sent flying backward. He tumbled through the air, violently spitting blood and teeth as he did so. "So you're actually a monarch tier?" Bao Jianhu said in a solemn voice. The demon who had been sent flying was a fourth severance emperor tier. Meanwhile, it was during the fifth severance when a monarch tier would possess the greatest advantage over an emperor tier. As such, it was no surprise that Ling Han had ended a battle with a single strike. Bao Jianhu became even more infuriated. A mighty monarch tier was actually riding on the coattails of celestial maiden Yunhe? Was he trying to sink the demon race's face into the abyss? "I said you'd regret it," celestial maiden Yunhe said, adding fuel to the fire. They were competition, so it was best to shoo them away as soon as possible. This naturally enraged Bao Jianhu even further. "Then let me experience his power," he said with a humph. Hunyo leaped forward. Her finger was pointed at Bao Jianhu, and she wore an expression of arrogance as she said, "Ugly bastard, Neo will destroy you." "You ugly bastard?" Bao Jianhu stammered with a stiff expression. He was a rare handsome man of the demon race, okay. It was simply because they belonged to different races that their perception of beauty was different. Anyhow, she actually dared to call him an ugly bastard? "Toxic woman, I can't forgive you!" He lunged forward, intent on giving Hunyo a vicious lesson. Who's scared of whom? Hunyo was unfazed as she charged forward. Pun pun pun! The two people immediately broke into a battle. To everyone's surprise, it was actually Hunyo who was enjoying the upper hand. Moreover, this was a significant upper hand. This was only natural. Hunyo had originally possessed the talent to become a monarch star, and it was only because there weren't enough source powers of heaven and earth, and because she only had the brand of a ninth heaven celestial king that she hadn't been able to cultivate a ninth divided soul. However, she was still a top talent among monarch tiers. Now that she had cultivated the regulations of the foreign realm, she had more so elevated her battle prowess to an even higher level. In reality, her true battle prowess was already no weaker than that of monarch stars. How could Bao Jianhu rival this? The young lady whooped and shouted, and as she swung her dainty fists, she appeared as beautiful as could be. However, the might of her attacks was immense, and Bao Jianhu was completely suppressed by her power. After several dozen more exchanges, the young lady sent Bao Jianhu flying with a violent kick. She obtained a flawless victory. This was only a battle at the severing mundane tier. If they had been at a higher cultivation level, Hunyo's battle prowess would have given her an even greater advantage. It was only after reaching the dividing soul tier that the gulf between monarch stars and monarch tiers became more apparent. The demons on Bao Yujian whose team were deeply astonished. They hurriedly helped Bao Yujian Hu up before turning around to flee. In fact, even the angels on Celestial Maiden Yunhe's team were transfixed with shock. They indeed knew that Hunyo was a monarch tier, yet they hadn't imagined that her battle prowess was also so formidable. This kind of battle prowess was quite unusual. How could the gulf between fellow monarch tiers be so great? Nyo is indeed powerful, Hunyo said with her hands on her hips. She was brimming with smugness, and she appeared very beautiful like this. Celestial Maiden Yunhe suppressed the shock in her mind before taking a deep look at Hunyo. Only after a brief moment did she say, "Let's head inside." They entered the cave. It was pitch black inside, and there was also an indescribable stench of decay. This was a pungent smell. After arriving at the end of the cave, they found a large corpse that had lain at rest for heaven knew how many years. It was mostly decayed, with only its skeleton remaining. It was draped in a golden robe, and it was emitting an intense stench. What kind of joke was this? Someone couldn't help but say, "This is the ancient tomb? This is the ancient corpse?" Celestial Maiden Yunhe shook her head. She pointed at the corpse and said, "Move this corpse away." Everyone exchanged glances, and two people immediately stepped forward to remove the corpse. "Ha! There's another cavern behind this corpse," the two people exclaimed. Ling Han also looked over. Sure enough, the large corpse had blocked the cavern behind it, making this place seem like the end of the cave. Whoosh! After moving the corpse a small distance, a powerful suction force suddenly appeared, and it was as if it wanted to suck all of them into the cavern. However, because this suction force was too powerful, pung! The corpse was pulled back, blocking the entrance to the cavern again. The suction force instantly vanished. The two angels responsible for moving the corpse exchanged a glance before saying, "Come, let's pull harder." Their eyes were slightly red. They had actually failed to resist the suction force and move the corpse. This was fairly embarrassing. Chapter 2290, Entering the Cavern. Chapter 2290, Entering the Cavern. 2/5 Severance cultivators had actually failed to move a corpse? Was this not a hilarious joke? They went to move the corpse again, and they both exerted their full strength. One side of the corpse was easily moved, yet when that cavern was slightly exposed, that overwhelming suction force appeared again. Regardless of how red-faced with exertion the two people became, their attempts to move the corpse were simply futile. They couldn't move it another inch. However, they had already been embarrassed once, so how could they bear to fail again? They both gave it their absolute all. Wang wang wang! Numerous symbols shone on their bodies as their wings beat rapidly. Pa! There was a flash of red, and the arm of one angel was surprisingly torn off, sending blood spurting through the air. The other angel was freaked out by this sight, and he hurriedly let go of the corpse. The corpse was instantly sucked back, blocking the entrance to the cavern again. "TM fine," the person who had suffered the torn arm said. As he channeled the power within him, the power of regulations enveloped him, causing a new arm to immediately grow out. This consumed a certain amount of his blood essence and power of regulations. As long as they didn't suffer extreme wounds, cultivators above the severing mundane tier could all recover at a rapid speed. This was because they didn't need to expel foreign martial intent. "How did you get wounded? Is there something strange about this corpse?" Celestial Maiden Yunhe asked in a grave voice. "No," the person said with a shake of their head. Slightly embarrassed, he continued, "I exerted too much strength, and it was because of this that I lost my arm." Everyone breathed a sigh of relief. However, this was quickly replaced by a feeling of shock. He had actually exerted so much strength that he pulled an arm off? Just how hard was he pulling? More importantly, he had already exerted so much strength, yet he still couldn't move that corpse? The immense power of the suction force was clear for all to see. Moreover, this corpse was far too sturdy, was it not? It had already been reduced to bones, and it was eternally at the mercy of this suction force, yet it still remained intact? This was truly astonishing. "This robe is most likely a precious treasure," someone said with sparkles in their eyes. They stared at the robe on the corpse. Everyone nodded in agreement. This robe had been able to resist the power of the suction force, so its defensive ability could at least rival that of 4th Severance Emperor tiers. This was the cultivation level of the two angels just then. A 5th Severance Monarch tier stepped forward and said, "Let me try." Another 5th Severance Monarch tier came forth and said, "I'll give you a hand." They grabbed the corpse together, one taking its left hand and one taking its right. They then pulled at it with force. The corpse was shuffled over, and the suction force instantly appeared again, as violent as could be. The two monarch tiers exerted their full strength, and the veins on their foreheads were already bulging. This completely ruined their beauty, and it made them appear extremely savage. Their wings continued to flap, and their legs also rose into the air. However, even though the corpse was easy to move, trying to completely move it aside was as difficult as ascending the heavens. It was almost an impossible task. In order to avoid a similar fate to the angel before, they quickly abandoned their attempt. "How can this be?" everyone asked in shock. How in the world could they enter? Even though they could create a small opening, what would they do if they were sucked in? After all, who knew what kinds of dangers lay inside? This place was filled with an eerie air, so who would be silly enough to believe that a paradise lay inside the cavern? "Why don't we remove its robe first?" someone suggested. The corpse had already decayed, so as long as they removed its robe, the corpse would presumably be sucked into the cavern with ease. At that time, the entrance to the cavern would also be exposed. This suggestion won the support of the others. They felt like this was a good idea. Linghan didn't oppose this suggestion either. He simply frowned, feeling an indescribable sense of unease. They started to remove the corpse's robe, yet they quickly discovered that the buttons of the robe were incredibly difficult to undo. After almost an hour, they finally managed to undo a single button. They instantly cheered in delight. There was finally a glimmer of hope. They continued to encourage themselves, and after an entire day, they finally managed to undo all of the buttons on the robe. Whoosh! The robe slapped onto the entrance of the cavern. Plop! After fluttering for a brief moment, it was instantly sucked inside. The corpse then collapsed as well, with its hundreds of bones flying into the cavern like meteors. Not good! Before Linghan could react, he had already lost control of his body. He was sucked toward the cavern. Not only him, but everyone else was lifted off their feet and sucked toward the cavern as well. This suction force was far too terrifying. Celestial Maiden Yunhe and some others flapped their wings furiously, trying their best to stabilize themselves in the air, yet their attempts were futile, and their struggles were insignificant before the power of the suction force. Whoosh! They were all sucked into the cavern. Their bodies tumbled around, and they all felt so nauseous that they wanted to vomit. In fact, several people fainted, after which bile was thrown from their mouths. After at least 30 minutes, they finally saw an expanse of blinding white light before them. Pun 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 puh! They landed one after another, slamming into the ground. However, they didn't feel any pain at all. This was a snowy mountain. No wonder it was so white and so bright, and no wonder their fall wasn't painful as expected. Everyone groaned as they crawled up. Even the few people who had fainted opened their eyes in a daze. However, they immediately started to violently vomit again. They were still feeling terrible. "Where is this?" they all asked. Celestial Maiden Yunhe was slightly pale. It was clear that the person who had drawn the map had never entered this place before, yet they had tricked others by saying that this was the tomb of some ancestral king. Their aim was to raise the price of that map. From the fact that they had sold 2 copies of the same map, it was already clear that the seller was lacking in integrity. From here on in, everything would be unfamiliar. This place was potentially fraught with danger. Someone clasped their head and said, "The bones have scattered everywhere, but that robe is nowhere to be seen." They hadn't managed to obtain anything. In fact, this was to be expected. With a single gust of wind, that robe could have been carried anywhere on the mountain. "Let's head back and take a look first," They wanted to check their path of retreat. They knew not of north, south, east, and west in this region, and their chaotic arrival just then also prevented them from knowing where they had come from. However, this didn't matter. As long as they could determine the direction of the wind, they would know where they had come from. They had been sucked in here, so they could presumably find the exit as long as they traveled following the wind. They set off, and it wasn't long before they discovered a cave on the side of the mountain. However, the winds that gushed out from the cave were far too violent, and they were immediately sent flying once they neared it. They couldn't resist them at all. After several tries, they had no option but to dejectedly give up. With their current strength, they had to admit that they couldn't overcome the power of these winds. "We have no option but to find another exit." They observed their surroundings. It was a sheet of white, and they couldn't see any other color. "Let's go. Perhaps we can still find that robe." This was at least some motivation. Just as they were about to set off, a loud screech of an eagle suddenly traveled over from the sky. They all looked up, only to see a mighty vulture soaring through the sky. Its wingspan measured 30 meters, and even though this was insignificant compared to those colossal monsters, it was radiating with an aura that instilled chilling fear in one's mind. The silver vulture also noticed them. It shot a glance at them, and this caused everyone's heart to shudder. They felt indescribably terrible. "This holy beast is incredibly powerful. It's at least at the 8th lotus." Their expressions changed drastically. If they were targeted by an 8th lotus holy beast, and if they had no path of retreat, their only option would be death. Where do we flee? Chapter 2291 Youth. Chapter 2291 Youth. The silver vulture gave a violent screech as it instantly folded its wings and swooped down. Its wings cut through the air like sharp blades, creating a vacuum in its surroundings. It was as quick as lightning. "Go to the cavern entrance!" Linghan shouted. At the same time, he grabbed Yunhe and the others as he immediately dashed away. The others all faltered briefly before immediately coming to their senses. They also ran back to the cavern entrance. The silver vulture forcefully beat its wings, changing its rapid dive into a quick glide. It then extended its claws, grabbing at Linghan and the others. It was truly a powerful holy beast. It was clearly still dozens of meters away from them, yet the permeation of its terrifying might was so overwhelming that they felt as if their skin were about to tear. Only Linghan was unfazed. His cultivation level had fallen, yet his physique hadn't become weaker. It was still incredibly powerful. In fact, he could face this attack head-on and still remain unfazed. How could he feel uncomfortable with the mere might of the 8th lotus holy beast alone? The arrival of the silver vulture's attack was imminent. Pung! However, its entire body was blasted back by the wind, and it couldn't put up any resistance at all. In the face of that terrifying wind, even a cultivation of the 8th lotus was useless. Everyone roared with laughter. Not only had they escaped from great danger, but they had even caused that silver vulture to become so disheveled. They had exacted revenge, and this filled them with delight. After a while, the silver vulture composed itself, and violently swooped toward them again. Pung! However, when it arrived in the region of the violent winds, it was instantly grabbed by the air currents and sent flying into the distance. It instantly vanished from sight. "Big bird, why don't you come again, huh?" Yunhe waved her arms at the large vulture, provoking it to attack again. "Come on, we're waiting for you here!" The others also shouted in a mocking tone. The silver vulture circled in the sky. However, it didn't make any reckless moves to attack them again. It had already developed deep apprehension for those powerful winds. It attempted to attack them several more times, yet it ultimately chose to give up. With a flap of its wings, it flew into the distance. Linghan and the others didn't dare to let their guard down. Instead, they remained alert, afraid that the large vulture would suddenly return again. After waiting for 3 days, and seeing no sign of the large vulture in the sky, they finally descended the mountain and set off again. This time, however, they didn't dare to fly through the sky. Doing so would make them a huge target. They traversed across the land, but it wasn't long before everyone trained their gaze on Ling Han. This was because his entire body was red, making him stick out like a sore thumb against the snow-covered land. Ling Han chuckled in response. With a single thought, his skin instantly became snow-white. Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others were all astonished. Even though changing the color of one's skin was extremely easy, ordinary monarchs were far too proud to do such a thing. Changing one's own appearance was naturally a humiliating act. However, before they had even complained, Ling Han had already taken the initiative to change his own skin color. This was absolutely astounding. What they didn't know was that Ling Han's identity as a demon was already a disguise in the first place. Thus, he naturally couldn't care less about changing his skin color. This person knows when to yield and when not to yield. How terrifying! Even though they didn't fly, their speed was still insane, and they arrived at the foot of the mountain in no time. Their vision was still filled with endless snow. Although they were all at the severing mundane tier, if they stayed here for too long, they would still feel a spine-chilling cold. They headed away from the mountain, and after walking for around 10 days, they finally exited the snowy plains. They saw an expanse of lush green before them, and this rejuvenated their spirits. The snowy plains had transformed into a boundless stretch of grassy plains. Along with it, their mood also brightened up. They continued forward, and the grassy plains also remained unchanging. In some places, the grass was only an inch long, while in other places, it would reach almost a meter in height. In fact, there were even places where the grass would become several meters tall. It was much like a miniature forest. After walking for so many days, they finally decided to stop for a rest. After all, they had come across a holy beast before, so it was best to remain vigilant. As such, they chose to rest amid a patch of tall grass. They would use the grass as a natural camouflage. They made the most of every minute to rest. After traveling for so many days, they indeed felt slightly fatigued. Everyone was suddenly astonished by the sound of rapidly approaching footsteps. As a person, they immediately exclaimed. This could be determined by them thanks to the pattern of the footsteps. The being only had 2 legs, so this pretty much eliminated everything apart from humanoid beings. Perhaps someone had arrived here before them? They all shook their heads. This was extremely unlikely. After all, they had only arrived here after removing the corpse that had blocked the entrance to the cavern. Of course, they couldn't discount the possibility that someone had shrunk down in size and created a small gap to enter. They're close. They all prepared for battle. Judging by the speed of the person, their cultivation level wasn't high. Whoosh! A figure soared past overhead, allowing them to observe them clearly. This was a youth who was only 15 or 16 years old. He was shirtless, and even though he wasn't tall, his body was firm with muscles. He was from the angel race, and he had a pair of wings on his back. However, these wings were pitifully small. At full stretch, they only measured a mere 60 centimeters across. Surprisingly, however, there was also a pair of horns on his head. This was clearly a unique feature of the demon race. The youth held an iron trident in his right hand, and the golden wrist guard on his forearm also reflected the dazzling light. Ling Han and the others immediately understood why this youth was fleeing. This was because a gigantic silver wolf was bounding after him, attempting to capture him. However, they immediately calmed down. This wolf was only at the 4th leaf of the 5th lotus. In other words, they could defeat it with a single glare. However, the youth was only at the 2nd leaf of the 5th lotus, which put him at a huge disadvantage against the wolf. He was naturally no match for it. After the youth and wolf passed, they all stood back up. With their cultivation, concealing themselves from this person and wolf was no difficult task. They exchanged glances, and they could all see the astonishment on each other's faces. This was because this youth was clearly too weak to have entered from that cavern entrance on the snowy mountain. This was an indigenous person. Just where in the world was this place? They followed the youth, and they were in no hurry to interfere. The youth continued to flee, yet his speed was no match for the wolf's. The distance between them grew smaller and smaller. In less than 15 minutes, the wolf arrived behind him, and it swiped at the youth's exposed back with a stretch of its right paw's claws. Right at this moment, the youth let out a loud roar as he stamped his right foot and suddenly turned around. He faced the gigantic wolf, and violently thrust his iron trident forward. The wolf extended its claws to block, yet it actually failed to push the trident aside. It was as if the youth's strength had instantaneously grown by a great amount. Pooh! The trident stabbed the wolf's left eye, sinking deep into its skull. Pun! The wolf counterattacked, sending the youth flying. However, it had no energy to continue pursuing him. Instead, it continued to jump around, with blood spraying from its left eye. It howled in grief. Pooh! The trident finally fell out, and the wolf used its remaining right eye to search for the youth. It wanted to kill him. However, even though the wolf didn't see Ling Han, it saw the dozen or so other people. It had suffered severe wounds, and even its brain had been heavily wounded. As such, how could it still think properly? Upon seeing people, it immediately lunged over with no hesitation at all. *SS off. A monarch shouted. Pa! The wolf instantly transformed into a cloud of blood. Chapter 2292 Strange Wrist Guard. Chapter 2292 Strange Wrist Guard. A mere Genesis tier demonic beast was nothing but trash before a 5th Severance monarch tier. It was ripped apart by a single roar. My wolf! My wolf! The youth exclaimed as he crawled up from the floor. There was a bleeding wound on his lower abdomen, yet he didn't pay any heed to this. Instead, he was dazed as he stared at the remains of the wolf with a dejected expression. Give me my wolf back! The youth shouted. His daze suddenly transformed into fury, and he instantly turned around to yell at the monarch tier. The monarch tier was extremely displeased. Just what kind of status did he possess? Yet, a mere 5th Lotus cultivator dared to yell at him? Absolutely ludicrous. He raised a hand and pointed at the youth. Even if he didn't kill him, he would give him a bitter lesson. Ling Han chuckled as he casually waved a hand. Pun! The monarch tier was instantly sent flying. He's still a youth, and you indeed destroyed his spoils of battle. Is chiding you wrong? Bewitching Maiden Ro was increasingly familiar with Ling Han, and she immediately stepped forward to say, Little brother, tell this older sister, why were you engaged in such a risky hunt? She practiced charm techniques, so she could subdue others without lifting a single finger. Even though her cultivation had been suppressed to the 5th Severance, she had still advanced to become a monarch tier, after all. This allowed her to become stronger against those at the same cultivation level. Moreover, the youth was only at the Genesis tier, so he more so couldn't resist her charm techniques. The youth felt as if the woman before him was as beautiful as a holy saint. He involuntarily wanted to obey her words, and he replied, Today's my coming-of-age ceremony, so I need to hunt prey that's stronger than me. That way, I can prove my worth to join the hunting team. What's your name? And where are you from? Bewitching Maiden Ro asked. My name is Yongqin, the youth replied. Intoxicated, he then said, I'm from the Maiden tribe. Big sister, you're so beautiful. A proud smile involuntarily spread across Bewitching Maiden Ro's face. The youth's final remark certainly wasn't because of her charm techniques. Instead, he truly found her beautiful from the bottom of his heart. This praise made her extremely happy. Big sister, I'll give you 10 items of prey to ask for marriage. Will you marry me? Yongqin asked. He surprisingly started to propose. Everyone involuntarily laughed. This youth was truly interesting. Bewitching Maiden Ro wore a proud expression as she said, I'm already married. Disappointment instantly washed over Yongqin's face. It was as if his life had lost all meaning. Young man, can you show me your wrist guard? Ling Han asked. He gazed at the wrist guard on the youth's forearm. An alert expression instantly spread across Yongqin's face. What are you trying to do? That's right, who are you people? He had actually revealed his identity in a daze. How uncanny! Ling Han smiled and said, We're not bad people. You can completely trust us. Yongqin naturally wouldn't believe him. His expression remained skeptical. "Little brother, you need to trust us," bewitching Maiden Rose said. There was a glimmer in her eyes. Yongqin involuntarily nodded. "This wrist guard can't be removed. Unless I die." Ling Han was astonished. He grabbed the youth's hand and carefully observed the wrist guard. Just then, the youth had been able to kill the wolf thanks to his tactic of purposefully fleeing to encourage an attack from the wolf. At the last moment, he launched a sudden strike to gain the upper hand. However, another reason for his success was this wrist guard, which suddenly glowed with a brilliant light the moment that he attacked. It bestowed him with more power. However, unlike the treasures that Ling Han was familiar with, this wrist guard wasn't decorated with any tool symbols. Even though there were patterns, these were simply decorations. This made him feel extremely curious. Others weren't as observative as him. After all, Ling Han had acted as the ruler of a heaven and earth for a period of time. Thus, he was now extremely sensitive to changes in power and regulations. In any case, even if the others noticed this detail, they wouldn't pay any heed to it. That was simply a tool at the fifth lotus, so how could it catch their attention? Ling Han carefully observed the wrist guard. Apart from being exquisitely beautiful, there was nothing else special about it. He became even more curious. He used his divine sense to observe its internals, yet this immediately led to an unforeseen accident. With a crack, the wrist guard suddenly shattered, apart before falling from the young man's wrist. "Ah!" Yongqin exclaimed in astonishment. His expression became dejected, and he shouted, "My wrist guard! My wrist guard!" His shouts were filled with grief. With the wrist guard falling to the ground, it was easy to see the needle-sized hole on the young man's wrist. However, Genesis Tier cultivators possessed decent recovery ability, so it wasn't long before this wound disappeared. This wound had most likely been left by the wrist guard. The youth had stated that his wrist guard couldn't be removed unless he was killed. Perhaps this needle-sized wound was what the wrist guard used to observe his life force? Ling Han let bewitching Maiden Rose console the youth. Meanwhile, he picked up the broken wrist guard and started to carefully examine it. He was immediately astonished by the intricate nature of its internals. It was filled with thin threads, though these threads had already been messed up now. It was as if the precious tool had self-destructed, forbidding others from observing its construction? Ling Han pondered for a brief moment. His strength was far above the upper limit of this wrist guard, so when his divine sense entered it, the wrist guard was naturally unable to resist. This most likely activated its self-destruct mechanism. Strange. Far too strange. If this precious tool had a tool spirit, was the most important thing not to protect its own life? Why would it choose to self-destruct? Meanwhile, the youth stopped his fit thanks to the comforting words of bewitching Maiden Rose. However, he still wore an ashen expression. According to him, precious treasures like this wrist guard were extremely valuable in his tribe. They were symbols of status. If they were destroyed, their owners would also be belittled and disdained by the rest of the tribe. Ling Han was extremely interested, and he said, "Let's go and take a look at his tribe." Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others didn't have any better suggestions, so they nodded in agreement after exchanging a few glances. They set off with the youth. However, they only arrived at the camp described by the youth after traveling for 3 days. It was a collection of tents that were placed in a circular shape. Several days ago, the youth had left by himself to hunt a wild beast that was stronger than him. This was in order to complete his coming-of-age ceremony. "Yongqin!" someone shouted. There was a woman standing at the entrance of the camp, and she started waving at the youth from very far away. "Mom!" the youth exclaimed. He also waved his hand as he ran toward the woman. "Son, you didn't get injured, did you?" the woman asked as she embraced the youth. She looked him up and down with a caring expression. "Mom, I'm fine," Yongqin said. It was clear that he was slightly embarrassed before everyone else. "Where's your wrist guard?" the woman immediately exclaimed upon noticing its disappearance. "That's a long story," Ling Han said as he walked over. "Who are you people?" the woman asked with an alert expression. She was surprisingly at the sixth lotus, though she had only reached the first leaf. She didn't have a wrist guard, but she instead wore a shoulder guard. At this moment, it was already glowing with a faint light. This was most likely a precious tool similar to the youth's wrist guard. Ling Han smiled faintly and replied, "Outsiders who accidentally arrived here." This woman was a pure demon. With this in mind, the youth's father was most likely a member of the angel race. After all, he was a mixed-blood child. As they spoke, more members of the tribe had already wandered over. They all stared at Ling Han and the others, and they were each holding an iron trident. Moreover, they were all wearing helmets, chest plates, knee guards, wrist guards, and similar types of precious tools. They all wore cautious expressions. Chapter 2293 Truly Strange. Chapter 2293 Truly Strange. Ling Han raised his hands and said, "We have no evil intentions. We only arrived here by accident." An elder walked out from among the people. There was a walking stick in his hand, and he was already fully bald. His white eyebrows hung down on the sides, and it was clear that he had already lived for many years. His eyes were filled with wisdom, and he asked, "From where have you come? For what reason have you come?" Ling Han gave a brief summary of their experiences without explicitly hiding anything. If he wanted to win their trust, it was best not to tell any lies. In any case, there was no need for him to lie anyway. After hearing his story, the members of the tribe all wore astonished expressions. There was actually a bigger world outside this heaven and earth. These tribespeople didn't have any malicious intentions. Since Ling Han had treated them with honesty, they naturally paid him back with honesty. They told him the secrets of this land. In fact, their story was very simple. They had lived here for generation after generation, and their greatest ambition was simply to stay alive. This was because this land had very scarce resources. If they wanted to survive, they needed to hunt powerful beasts. Alternatively, they could compete for the herbivores with these carnivorous wild beasts. Ling Han and the others were quite surprised. After reaching the second lotus, which was equivalent to the spiritual pedestal tier of the celestial realm, cultivators could survive simply by breathing spiritual qi. After reaching the mountain river tier, one wouldn't die even if their spiritual qi were exhausted. They would simply become extremely weak. However, the people here were all at the fifth lotus or sixth lotus, yet they still worried about survival? Was this not strange? Hang on! After hearing the tribespeople's explanation, Ling Han and the others also noticed that something was off. Their strength had surprisingly weakened a bit. Perhaps we've eaten too little? They had only eaten a single meal these past 10 days, so perhaps this had affected their strength. This was inconceivable. The spiritual qi here is almost exhausted. It's almost impossible to cultivate, they exclaimed. They should have discovered this upon arriving at this place. However, they only realized it now, and it was as if there were some mysterious power affecting their cognitive ability. Fuck! Where in the hell is this? Everyone was slightly scared. If they didn't eat, they would actually risk death? If they told this to anyone else, they would be laughed off like a clown. Now, however, this was a very real threat. Since spiritual qi is deficient, how are those holy beasts cultivating? Ling Han asked. They had reached their cultivation level by eating. Even though this place had little spiritual qi, it did still exist, after all. It was simply that one couldn't extract this spiritual qi through normal methods. Only the plants that grew on the land could absorb this spiritual qi. After ingesting these plants, the herbivorous animals would then naturally have a reserve of spiritual qi. After being hunted and eaten, these herbivorous animals would then provide spiritual qi to the cultivators. Everyone could understand this. However, why would they starve to death if they didn't eat? They quickly learned another piece of vital information. Everyone in the tribe had a limited lifespan. Currently, the record for the oldest person was 800 years old. They had died from natural causes, and not at the hands of a wild beast. Only a mere 800 years. One had to realize that those at the heaven tier could already live for 800 years. After reaching the severing mundane tier, one would more so never need to worry about their lifespan anymore. They simply needed to overcome their immortal's tribulation. Here, however, disease and death were all important matters that people needed to worry about. It's as if immortal's tribulation occurs once a year here. Thus, even the strongest person could only hold on for 800 years before being killed, Ling Han speculated in his mind. This wasn't impossible. After all, there were already cases of people starving to death. That being the case, it wouldn't be impossible for immortal's tribulation to befall more frequently in this heaven and earth. Ling Han asked for more information from the tribe's people. However, even though this tribe was always migrating around, they only did so in a small area 500 kilometers in radius. They couldn't migrate any further. This was because another tribe existed beside them. If they ventured any further, they might potentially trigger a battle. Ling Han was extremely interested in their precious tools, so he started to ask about their origins. All of our armor comes from the Holy Mountain, the elder replied. According to him, one simply needed to forge their armor and bring it to the Holy Mountain. After leaving it there for 3 years, they could retrieve it to use. This armor could be used to increase either their offensive ability or their defensive ability. However, it would feed on their blood when they used it, and thus each person could only possess one piece of such armor. If they tried to use more, they would naturally die once their blood essence was exhausted. These pieces of armor were the most valuable asset of this tribe. This was their key to survival. Second to this was food. In fact, both were almost equally as important. As such, the tribe's people neither gifted Ling Han and the others with armor, nor did they welcome them with food. Ling Han and the others hadn't noticed it before, but they discovered that they were incredibly hungry at this moment. It was as if they had truly transformed into ordinary mortals. We most likely entered the territory of some powerful elite. This place is run according to their regulations, so we're also subject to the cycle of life and death. We can also feel hunger and starvation. Everyone reached the same conclusion. However, its effects are so great, and it's even overriding the ordinary regulations of heaven and earth. Just how powerful is this person? Heavenly Venerate? Someone asked in a shaky voice. Celestial Maiden Yunhe immediately shook her head, saying, "Only the regulations within a small region are being affected, so even ancestral kings are capable of this. It's simply the case that the stronger an ancestral king, the larger the region that they can affect. Celestial kings stood equal with the regulations, so it was possible for them to override the regulations of heaven and earth within a small region. However, even if this were only a 10th Lotus ancestral king, how could Ling Han and the others hope to rival them with their measly power? I's most likely beneath an ancestral king to engage in such behavior," Ling Han said. "Ancestral kings couldn't be so bored and silly. Perhaps this ancestral king has already passed away. Or maybe they've been severely wounded and trapped in an unconscious state." Ling Han wasn't overly worried. If it truly came to the worst, he could unleash the might of the Black Tower to forcefully break free from this place. However, if he did this, the Black Tower might truly become a crippled tower. It would lose all of its power. Thus, unless it was absolutely necessary, he definitely wouldn't use the Black Tower again. Ling Han wore a faint smile as he retrieved some food from the Black Tower. The tribe's people instantly started to drool upon seeing this. Not only them, but the eyes of Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others also glimmered with greed. After reaching their cultivation level, they would only store stones and celestial medicines in their spatial god tool. How could they have any food? Food for armor. Deal or no deal? He asked with a smile. Don't lie to me. There are definitely new pieces of armor lying around. The tribe's people salivated as they stared at the food. Esteemed guests, you have to realize that the metals and ores used to forge these pieces of armor are extremely difficult to mine, an elder of the tribe said. He was clearly trying to bargain. Ling Han wasn't afraid of them asking for a higher price as long as they were willing to trade. Thus, he smiled and said, I can add some more food. However, the more important thing is, how many items do you have to exchange? The elder smiled, and even the wrinkles on his face smoothed out a little. After bargaining for a while, Ling Han used a large amount of food to trade for a set of armor. He could armor himself from head to toe. However, he was told by the tribespeople that even if someone were incredibly strong, they could at most only wear 2 pieces of armor at once. Otherwise, they would be seeking death. Ling Han nodded in understanding. He then traded for 1 more wrist guard, and tossed it to Yongqin. This was to compensate him for his loss. After that, he started to immediately investigate these pieces of armor. Chapter 2294 Full Set. Chapter 2294 Full Set. However, before starting his investigation, Ling Han was dragged along by the Empress and the others to eat a meal first. Everyone was starving, and there were also peculiar regulations here. While they still maintained their power, they also faced the challenges of ordinary mortals. They would feel thirst, and they would feel hunger. They would even be constricted by a limited lifespan. Thus, they were all extremely anxious to leave this place. Otherwise, they might truly die of old age. Moreover, after the lesson from just then, they would definitely store some food in their spatial god tool in the future. After all, they never knew when it might come in handy. Ling Han generously shared his food with everyone. However, he naturally limited how much food he shared. It was just enough for everyone to relieve their hunger. If they wanted more, no problems. They could trade for more using celestial medicines. This caused everyone to fume. Ling Han was blatantly scamming them in a time of dire need. However, Ling Han was neither stealing nor robbing, even though he was clearly stronger than them. Thus, what could they say? Several people couldn't endure the hunger, so they set off to hunt. Ling Han chuckled upon seeing this. He then entered the Black Tower after satisfying the appetites of Hu Niu and the others. Before entering, he first made some gestures with his arm, cutting out a part of the space before him. He then placed 2 unopenable scrolls inside this space. These scrolls couldn't be taken inside the Black Tower, nor could they be placed in his spatial storage rings. They could only remain in heaven and earth. It was as if they were the property of the heavens, things that couldn't leave the gaze of heaven and earth for even a split second. The void naturally belonged to the heavens as well. It was just that very few people entered. Ling Han used the regulations of space to create a stable space before him. This space could remain for a long time without crumbling. These scrolls were truly glorious beings. Each time he entered the Black Tower, he would need to create a space for them first. He sighed as he entered the Black Tower. His body instantly became lighter, and it was as if something that had been weighing down on him had suddenly disappeared at this instant. "Small tower, wake up," Ling Han said. This was the foreign realm, so without the power of heaven and earth from the celestial realm, Small Tower would remain in a state of deep sleep. It wouldn't wake for trivial reasons. "You're wasting my energy again," Small Tower said. Ling Han chuckled and said, "Observe your surroundings. What power is this?" Small Tower paused for a moment before replying. "This power is around that of an 8th heaven celestial king, however, it feels completely lifeless. It's most likely that a 9th heaven celestial king passed away, after which his body fused into this heaven and earth, thereby replacing the original regulations of this land. It's also because of this that their power fell to the 8th heaven. A dead celestial king would naturally become weaker than when they were alive. Thus, it was understandable that their power fell from the 9th heaven to the 8th heaven." Ling Han nodded in understanding. As long as this wasn't the power of a heavenly venerate, he could use the might of the Black Tower to break free. At the very least, he had a path of retreat. This filled him with confidence. When that person had sold Celestial Maiden Yunhe the map, they had lied and said that this was the tomb of an ancestral king. Surprisingly, however, his lie had transformed into a reality. This was genuinely the tomb of an ancestral king. Moreover, it was the resting place of an 18th Lotus ancestral king. Are these strange pieces of armor also created by the power of this celestial king? Ling Han picked up a wrist guard. As long as this piece of armor was placed on the so-called Holy Mountain, it would automatically transform into a precious tool. He could only attribute this to the influence of the Celestial King. He wore the wrist guard, and he immediately felt a sharp prick on his skin. However, his physique was far too powerful, so the wrist guard failed to penetrate his skin. With a single thought, he reduced the power of his physique. He instantly felt a slight pain, and a thin needle pierced into his skin, stabbing into his vein. Ling Han was astonished. He could feel the wrist guard fusing together with him, and it was as if it had become part of his body. Interesting. With a thought from him, the patterns of the wrist guard immediately lit up, causing a torrent of power to surge into his body. This elevated his battle prowess by a slight amount. However, a drop of his blood was also consumed. This was the price that the tribespeople spoke of. Ling Han was slightly surprised. Even though a drop of his blood had been consumed, this was truly nothing compared to the amount of blood he had. Moreover, his life essence was profound, so as long as his blood essence wasn't consumed, he could endlessly create ordinary blood. Of course, this blood was only ordinary compared to his blood essence. His physique had been tempered using the indestructible Heaven's Scroll, so his ordinary blood was comparable to the blood essence of others. If this is the case, I can wear far more than 2 pieces of armor at once, he murmured to himself. He entered the wrist guard with his divine sense again. However, even though this wrist guard belonged to him, it was still resistant to his observation. It instantly shattered into pieces. This piece of armor isn't as strong as me, so it immediately shattered upon being observed by my divine sense. However, if it was stronger than me, it could most likely keep my divine sense from entering. Otherwise, this kind of armor would be completely meaningless. Enemies would be able to shatter it with a single sweep of their divine sense. Fortunately, I traded for a few more wrist guards. Ling Han wore another wrist guard. Not 1 but 2. The 2 wrist guards lit up in unison. This placed more stress on Ling Han's body, though it was still an insignificant amount. What about 3? What about 4? One after another, Ling Han continued to wear more pieces of armor. Eventually, he was armored from head to toe. However, because the tribespeople had never considered making a full suit of armor, these pieces of armor were extremely incompatible, with clear gaps between the different pieces of armor. However, Ling Han was slightly astounded as he threw a punch. Pun! A burst of energy surged forward, transforming into a terrifying cyclone of energy. My original battle prowess was around the Earth Soul. Now, however, it's reached the Heaven Soul. In fact, it's even slightly more powerful. In other words, a full suit of armor can elevate my battle prowess by a minor tier. This is equivalent to a king tier becoming an emperor tier tier becoming a monarch tier, or a monarch tier becoming a monarch star. This was absolutely astounding. This was only a suit of armor, one which wasn't very difficult to obtain, in fact. As long as one forged a billet and placed it on the holy mountain, it would transform into such armor after only 3 years. If this armor can be used in the 2-realm battlefield, won't the foreign realm gain a significant advantage? Ling Han mulled over this problem. This secret technique was seemingly confined to this heaven and earth, with no one else aware of its existence. Anyhow, his vitality was far too rich. He felt completely fine even after wearing a full suit of armor. Ling Han exited the Black Tower, and his armored appearance instantly shocked everyone in the surroundings. Divine Deity! Upon witnessing Ling Han's appearance, the tribespeople all fell to their knees. They kowtowed to Ling Han, and their expressions were as respectful as could be. They were truly treating him like a divine deity. Meanwhile, Yunhe and the others exchanged a glance. They felt like Ling Han's appearance was slightly stupid. Ling Han hadn't imagined that his get-up would elicit such a strong reaction. Thinking about it carefully, however, the people in the tribe could only wear 2 pieces of armor at most, so it was indeed shocking that he had been able to don a full suit of armor. He laughed before calling Yunhe and the others over. He planned to visit the Holy Mountain as soon as possible, for the corpse of the 18th Lotus Ancestral King most likely lay there. If he could deal with it there, he wouldn't need to use the Black Tower to escape. In addition, he was extremely interested in how these pieces of armor were created. If he could learn the method, he could significantly improve the celestial realms standing against the foreign realm. Chapter 2295 Holy Mountain. Chapter 2295 Holy Mountain. Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others pondered for a moment before hurriedly running over to follow Ling Han. Ling Han was far too powerful, and his mind was also extremely nimble. They couldn't go wrong if they followed him. Ling Han didn't stop them either. Even though he detested the people of the foreign realm, those who invaded the celestial realm all belonged to the demon race. Not a single one of them belonged to the angel race. Thus, it was extremely difficult for him to hate them. In any case, the angel race was battling against the dark inverse realm on the other side of the foreign realm, so Ling Han naturally wished that they were as powerful as could be. Otherwise, if the dark inverse realm conquered the foreign realm, the next in line to fall would be the celestial realm. Because of this, he decided to give Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others a hand. He would bring them out of this place. The invading claws of the foreign realm needed to be severed. However, the armor that defended them needed to be reinforced. They needed to hold back the invading dark inverse realm. They ventured into the distance, coming across several other tribes in the process. However, they passed these areas peacefully, not triggering any conflict. After a dozen or so days, a large mountain appeared in their vision. It was golden yellow, and it was much like a mountain that had been created from gold. "This is the Holy Mountain," they all said. According to the information provided by the tribespeople, this was the Holy Mountain. From the outside, it looked like a mountain that had been forged from gold. However, when they ascended it, it would appear no different from ordinary mountains. For some strange reason, however, it would always look like a golden mountain from afar. From this point on, their journey would start to become dangerous. According to the tribespeople, powerful beasts wander around the foot of the mountain, hunting those who come to ascend the mountain. In fact, the most powerful beast can rival those at the 9th lotus. If we come across one, we won't even have the opportunity to flee. We must be extremely careful. They quietly chattered among themselves. This place was far too dangerous, and the wild beasts more so wouldn't give a toss about their backgrounds. Regardless of whether they were the successor of a large clan or a student of the 100 Battles Academy, they would be eaten if they were caught. Here, staying alive was their top priority. Ling Han was slightly more confident. Even though his cultivation had been suppressed, his divine demon sword had already advanced to the level of divine metal. Even though it still had yet to reach the level of celestial tool, the domineering nature of its sword she could already threaten those at the ascending origin tier. Of course, the prerequisite to this was that Ling Han had an opportunity to launch an attack. Otherwise, if an ascending origin tier elite killed him with a single thought, everything would be for naught. In this place, metals were a rare commodity. However, they did still exist. Thus, tribespeople would enter the Holy Mountain every year, transforming ordinary pieces of armor into treasured tools. However, the probability of being killed was also extremely high. As such, it wasn't strange to see pieces of armor littering the ground. This was a common sight. Of course, these billets would also be picked up by others. They wouldn't stay on the ground forever. Ling Han and the others saw several armor billets as they walked toward the Holy Mountain. This was a physical reminder of the cruel reality of this place. People were dying all the time. Crackle! A strange sound ripped through the air, and they looked over to see a gigantic insect appear. Its body was pitch black and covered in a layer of solid armor that reflected a metallic glow. A lotus bloomed on its back, showing 7 petals and 4 leaves. It flapped its cicada-like wings, and it was this that caused the strange sound. Celestial Maiden Yunhe and the others all wore anxious expressions. This insect was extremely powerful, far exceeding the limits of their battle prowess. They all retrieved their precious armor, yet they still felt a complete lack of confidence. The gulf between them was simply too great. Ling Han strode forward. His suit of armor significantly boosted his battle prowess, allowing him to rival those at the 4th leaf of the 7th lotus. "Brother Ba, don't be reckless!" Celestial Maiden Yunhe hurriedly shouted in warning. she wasn't worried about Ling Han per se, but rather worried that they would lose their key to leaving this place. The others all nodded in agreement. Against a powerful insect like this, fleeing was naturally the best course of action. According to the tribespeople, the Holy Mountain was a forbidden area for the insect race and the holy beasts. Not a single one of them dared to enter. Thus, they would be safe as long as they fled onto the mountain. Don't worry, Neos is the strongest. He can definitely defeat this ugly insect. Hunyo was filled with confidence. Fortunately, she had finally become a little smarter, and she didn't directly call Ling Han's name. No one believed her. Those at the 5th leaf of the 6th lotus possessed a battle prowess around the 1st leaf of the 7th lotus. The gulf between this and the 4th leaf was far too great. It would be a miracle if Ling Han could win. Crackle! The gigantic insect fluttered its wings as it swooped down at Ling Han. Just the turbulence caused by its flapping wings was already terrifying, with the surrounding air transforming into blades of wind that slashed at Ling Han. Ling Han roared as he threw a fist, with his attack instantly transforming into a giant hammer. Clang, clang, clang! The blades of wind were obliterated. The hammer then raced toward the insect at an incredible speed. Everyone was shocked by this sight. They knew that Ling Han was powerful as he possessed the ability to defeat a monarch tier at the same cultivation level in a single strike. This placed his true battle prowess at the 2nd leaf, or even the 3rd leaf of the 7th lotus. However, one's freakish power needed to have a limit, right? After all, his cultivation level was clear for all to see. He still had yet to reach the 7th lotus. However, Ling Han's attack instantly provided them with boundless delight. He could easily rival the attacks of those at the 4th leaf of the 7th lotus. They gazed at Ling Han's suit of armor, which was fully glowing at this moment. Even though it couldn't be considered as a genuine set, it still made Ling Han appear extremely domineering and mighty at this moment. Perhaps this is... Celestial Maiden Yunhe's expression instantly became animated. "Also have the same thought," a monarch tier said. His eyebrows jiggled, and it was as if he were about to start dancing. "The Dark Inverse Realm's armor!" several people exclaimed in unison. Celestial Maiden Yunhe's face flushed red with excitement, and she was beside herself with delight. "The rough billets can transform into battle armor after being placed on the Holy Mountain. Judging from this Holy Mountain definitely has links to the Dark Inverse Realm. We've always wanted to discover the secret behind the Dark Inverse Realm's armor. If we can obtain this secret, our overall battle prowess will rise by a significant amount. At that time, resisting the Dark Inverse Realm will be no problem, and conquering the Celestial Realm will also be far easier than anticipated. In fact, we might even be able to launch a counterattack against the Dark Inverse Realm. After fusing the 2 dimensions together, even if we don't become a medium-level dimension, we can still at least rise to the top of the low-level dimensions. Even though we've killed several elites from the Dark Inverse Realm at the border, once they die, their armor also self-destructs. As such, we've never been able to discover the secrets behind their armor. Perhaps this is a chance." They were all filled with excitement. If they truly managed to bring a flawless suit of armor back, they would have made a massive contribution to the foreign realm. Perhaps even heavenly venerates would come to commend them. Boom! 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 Meanwhile, Ling Han was still battling against the giant insect. Even though his battle prowess was extremely impressive, the giant insect's shell was a natural layer of armor. It was incredibly hard, and even Ling Han's full power attacks could only leave some dents. However, these dents would quickly recover, and it was as if the insect wasn't being affected at all. As the battle dragged on, Ling Han also discovered that he was becoming increasingly hungry. It was as if his strength had been exhausted, and he was overcome by a feeling of fatigue. This was the peculiar suppression of this heaven and earth. Living beings all had to consume food. Otherwise, they would feel fatigued and exhausted. On the other hand, this giant insect had clearly become familiar with this peculiar environment, so its endurance was far greater than that of Ling Han. If this continued, Ling Han would lose. The excitement was wiped off everyone's face. If the situation didn't improve, they would all die here. Hurry up and ascend the mountain, they said with urgency. Since Ling Han could still rival the giant insect, they needed to seize this opportunity to climb the mountain. Otherwise, they would face certain death. Ling Han shook his head. He then retrieved the Divine Demon's sword. You're tuning into the Phoenix Knights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.